3 days until the world ended, and all I could think about was the sound my leg made when it snapped. It wasn't a dramatic movie crack. It was a wet, crunching tear, like biting into a celery stalk made of bone and sinew. I was on the filthy pavement outside my own goddamn store, Ryder's Mart, and the pain was a white-hot sun exploding behind my eyes. Above me, framed by the grimy metal doorframe, were the faces of my two favorite people. Kevin, my best friend since kindergarten, the guy I'd shared my first beer and my last can of beans with. And Jessica, the girl I'd been crushing on since high school, with a smile that could, and apparently did, hide a heart colder than a morgue slab. "Sorry, Alex," Kevin said, his voice completely devoid of any actual sorrow. He was just saying the words. "It's nothing personal. Survival of the fittest, you know?" He and Jessica were clutching armfuls of canned food, meds, and water bottles. My food, my meds, my water, my survival. The heavy steel security door began to roll down with a deafening screech. It was my final curtain call. "Please," I begged, the word a pathetic rasp. The dead were already turning towards me, drawn by the sound and the fresh scent of my blood pooling on the asphalt. Their low moans were the opening act for the main event. "Don't do this." Jessica just looked down on me, her pretty face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated contempt. "You were always too weak for this world, Alex. We're just trimming the fat." The door slammed shut. The last thing I saw was their triumphant silhouettes. The last thing I heard was their laughter mingling with the approaching symphony of damnation. My soul screamed a vow that fire and death couldn't erase. "I will find you. I will make you suffer. I will tear you apart, atom by atom." Then, a walker, its jaw hanging by a thread of skin, lunged, and I opened my eyes. I was standing. My leg was fine. The air didn't smell like rot and despair. It smelled like cardboard boxes and the faint, sweet scent of industrial-strength floor cleaner. I was in the back storeroom of Ryder's Mart. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a sound I hadn't heard in years. It was clean, orderly. "Whoa, Alex, you spacing out?" That voice. That goddamn voice. I turned slowly, my heart a block of ice in my chest. There he was, Kevin. No bloodstains, no desperate hunger in his eyes. Just a stupid, goofy grin plastered on his face, wearing the red Ryder's Mart employee vest I'd given him when his last job fell through. He looked so young, so alive, so punchable. "Big plans this weekend?" he continued, completely oblivious to the murderous energy rolling off me. "Thinking we should hit up O'Malley's. Jessica said she's down to go." Jessica. Of course. The viper was already coiled in the nest. My past life, or was it my future, flashed before my eyes. Sharing my food while I ate less. Standing guard so they could sleep. Defending them from other desperate survivors. Telling everyone we were a team. I was the loyal guard dog, and they were just waiting for the right moment to put me down and raid the pantry. The rage didn't come as a hot flash. It was cold. Crystalline. It settled deep in my bones and gave me a clarity I'd never known. The old Alex, the chump, the people-pleasing doormat, had died on that pavement. The thing wearing his skin now was something else entirely. I looked at Kevin, at this parasite who had laughed as I was eaten alive. My expression was a flat, emotionless void. "You're fired." The goofy grin on Kevin's face froze, then slid off like it was made of wax. "What?" "Dude, what are you talking about? Did I forget to stock the chips aisle again? It was one time, man." He tried to laugh it off, a nervous, barking sound. It was the same laugh I'd heard through the steel door. My eyes were locked on his. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The sheer, glacial weight of my stare was enough to make the air in the room drop 20 degrees. "I don't think you heard me," I said, my voice low and even. "You are fired. Your employment here is terminated. Effective immediately. Give me your keys. Then get the hell out of my store." Kevin blinked, his brain clearly struggling to process this new reality. The Alex he knew was a pushover. A guy you could borrow $20 from and never pay back. A guy who would apologize if you stepped on his foot. This was not that Alex. "Alex, man, what is this?" He took a step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Is this about Jessica? Did I say something? Niman, talk to me." "There is nothing to talk about," I cut him off. My mind was a steel trap. I saw his face, not as it was now, but as it was in my final moments. Smug, triumphant. I saw Jessica's sneer. The memory was so fresh, so visceral, it was more real than the storeroom around me. "Your services are no longer required. Keys, now." His face went through a hilarious series of micro-expressions. Confusion, indignation, a flicker of fear, and finally settling on a pouty frustration. He was like a spoiled child who just had his favorite toy taken away. For his entire life, he treated me like a safety net, a resource to be exploited. He couldn't comprehend the resource was now telling him to get lost. Fine. Whatever, dude. He spat, his friendly guy mask cracking to reveal the petulant little weasel underneath. He fumbled in his pocket, ripped the store keys off his carabiner, and threw them on the concrete floor between us. They clattered with a satisfying finality. This is crazy, you know that? Completely psycho, he muttered, shaking his head as he stalked towards the exit. Don't come crying to me when you need help moving boxes this weekend. Oh, you sweet, clueless moron, I thought, a sliver of dark amusement finally piercing my icy calm. In a few days, you'll be crying for a single can of beans. And I'll be watching. Maybe I'll even stream it for myself in HD. He shoved the door open and stormed out, leaving a blessed silence in his wake. Step 1. Take out the trash. Check. I didn't waste a second. I picked up the keys, my a-hole ex-friend's germs probably still warm on them, and walked to the front of the store. The world outside the big glass windows was aggressively normal. Cars drove by. People walked their dogs. A mom pushed a stroller. It was a perfect slice of Americana, completely unaware that the servers for civilization were about to crash. Hard. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up. The date confirmed it. 3 days. I had 3 days. My fingers flew across the screen. I didn't call my parents. They'd passed away years ago. My only family was my little sister, Maya, currently safe, for now, at her university dorm hundreds of miles away. Getting to her was priority 2. Priority 1 was fortification. I Googled 24/7 emergency locksmith Denver. A moment later, I was on the phone. Yes, hello. I need every single lock changed at my commercial property. Ryder's Mart on the corner of Oak and 12th. Yes, all of them. Front door, back door, storeroom, office. I want high security, pick-proof, drill-proof, everything-proof locks. The most expensive ones you have. How soon can you get here? An hour? Perfect. I'll pay double for you to make it 30 minutes. I hung up. The old Alex would have agonized over the cost. He would have tried to find a coupon. The new me didn't give a damn. Money was about to become less valuable than toilet paper. Infrastructure was everything. I walked over to the break room and flicked on the small TV mounted in the corner. A news anchor with too much makeup was smiling brightly. And in other news, health officials are downplaying concerns over a new aggressive flu strain reported in Southeast Asia, stating that the chances of a global outbreak are, quote, extremely minimal. Now, over to Bob with the weather. Looks like a beautiful sunny weekend ahead, Bob. I let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a dry, rusty sound. Extremely minimal. Right. These people were living in a sitcom, and I was the only one who'd read the script for the horror movie finale. A notification pinged on the TV screen in my mind. Something that wasn't there a second ago. Back quote. Congratulations, host. You have successfully bound with the ultimate supermarket fortress system. Back quote. Back quote. First anomaly neutralized, Trader Kevin. Back quote. Back quote. Reward system activated. Back quote. Back quote. New host mission survive. Back quote. A faint, blue, translucent screen flickered into existence in my vision. It was filled with stats and tabs. Status, upgrades, storage, map. So, it was real. Not a dream. Not a dying hallucination. I got a do-over. And, this time, I had cheat codes. A smirk finally touched my lips. It wasn't a happy expression. It was the smirk of a predator that just realized it owns the entire goddamn zoo. I pulled up my banking app. My business account was laughable. My personal savings were even more pathetic. A collection of maxed-out credit cards stared back at me. To the old me, this was a portrait of failure. To the new me, it was a war chest. 3 days. 72 hours to turn this flimsy grocery store into an impenetrable fortress. 72 hours to loot the old world before it burns. The game was on. And this time, I wasn't the player. I was the house. And the house always wins. 2 days, 11 hours, and 50-some-odd minutes. Until civilization decided to collectively log off. And I was on a shopping spree that would make a billionaire blush. The old Alex would have been paralyzed by the numbers flashing on the credit card terminal. He would have had a panic attack in the checkout line. Me? I was swiping plastic like it was an Olympic sport, and I was going for gold. Every beep of the machine was music to my ears. It was the sound of my future enemies starving. My first act after getting the system online was to liquidate. I drained my laughable business account, my even more pathetic personal savings, and then I went to town on the credit cards. American Express, Visa, MasterCard. They were all my little soldiers, marching bravely into a debt they would never get a chance to collect. RIP my 800 credit score. You served me well. My shopping list, burned into my brain from years of apocalyptic suffering, wasn't for ramen or bottled water. My system handled the basics. My list was for the irreplaceable gold of the New World. First stop, a commercial fuel depot on the industrial outskirts of Denver. The guy at the desk, a greasy dude with a coffee-stained mustache named Earl, looked at me like I'd grown a second head when I ordered 55-gallon drums of gasoline and another 50 of diesel. Son? He drawled, wiping his hands on an already filthy rag. You planning on starting your own airline? I just gave him a dead-eyed smile. Something like that. It's for a performance art piece. He grunted, probably writing me off as some eccentric tech bro with too much money. Fine by me. While he was processing the payment, a glorious 5-figure sum that made his eyes bug out, I walked out to the loading dock where they were lining up the barrels. I laid a hand on the first one. Backquote. Confirm transfer of 55 gallons of regular unleaded gasoline to personal storage? Backquote. Confirm, I muttered under my breath. The barrel vanished. Just poof. Gone. I went down the line. Poof. 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 In less than 30 seconds, 105 massive, heavy steel drums had disappeared from the face of the earth. I turned around to see one of the loading dock workers, a kid no older than 20, staring at the empty space, his mouth hanging open, and a half-eaten donut frozen midway to his lips. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. I just shrugged and gave him a wink. It's performance art. The kid looked like his entire understanding of physics had just been curb-stomped. That was a look I was going to get used to seeing. Next up, a major medical supply wholesaler. I strode past the aisles of gauze and aspirin, heading straight for the high-end prescription-only stuff. Thanks to my business license for the mart, I could place bulk orders. I didn't just order antibiotics. I ordered cases of every broad-spectrum antibiotic known to man. Ciprofloxacin, doxycycline, amoxicillin. I bought surgical kits, sutures, morphine drips, insulin, EPI pens, and enough iodine to turn a lake orange. The pharmacist, a tired-looking woman named Brenda, peered at me over her glasses. This is an unusually large order for a convenience store, Mr. Ryder. Are you expecting a local catastrophe? You have no idea, I said with the straightest face I could manage. Most of this stuff would become currency more valuable than gold. But some of it was from my sister, Maya. She had asthma. In my past life, I'd watched helplessly as her inhalers ran out. Never again. A whole pallet of albuterol went poof into my storage space right in the middle of their storeroom. I left them to figure out their own inventory shrinkage problem. Then came the hardware and sporting goods stores. While dumbasses were still debating which team was going to win this weekend, I was buying every single high-powered hunting crossbow, every bolt, and every broadhead in a 50-mile radius. In a world without easily available ammunition, the silent, reusable lethality of a crossbow was king. I bought machetes, hatchets, and high-quality survival knives. I bought industrial-sized packs of seeds, corn, beans, squash, potatoes, the building blocks of a future farm, solar panels, deep cycle batteries, power inverters, and enough copper wire to fence in a small town. The best part was the look on the cashier's face at a massive store called Outdoor Overload. I had 3 flatbeds piled high with merchandise. He scanned the last item, a heavy-duty winch, and the total was astronomical. All right, sir, he said, trying to sound professional. That'll be a lot. How are you getting all this home? You got a semi-truck waiting outside? I grinned, tapped my credit card, and then walked over to the mountain of gear. I placed my hand on a box of water purifiers. Don't worry about it. I absorbed the whole pile in one go. The entire 3-cart pile of survival gear just blinked out of existence. The cashier, the bag boy, and a Karen who was about to complain about the wait time all froze solid. The silence was so complete you could hear the muzak playing softly overhead. I turned back to the cashier, who looked like his soul had just been hit with a 404 error. Forgot my reusable bags. Have a nice doomsday. On the drive back to the mart, the radio was pure comedy. Officials from the CDC are assuring the public that the so-called rage flu is contained, and that rumors of violent cannibalistic behavior are unsubstantiated fear-mongering, likely part of a foreign disinformation campaign. I snorted. Disinformation campaign. Right. The zombies were Russian bots, I guess. Flipping through social media was even better. A few blurry videos had surfaced from cities in Asia and parts of Europe. People sprinting with unnatural speed, tackling others. The chaos absolute. But they were quickly taken down, flagged as violating community standards. The comment sections were a war zone, between people screaming that it was real, and an army of trolls and oblivious idiots calling it fake, a marketing stunt for a new horror movie. Idiots. They were living their last few hours of blissful ignorance, arguing on the internet while the apocalypse was literally kicking down the front door. They deserved what was coming. Back at Ryder's Mart, the locksmith had already finished. The new locks were monsters of hardened steel. Nobody was getting through this door without a bazooka. And soon, not even a bazooka would be enough. The next phase was construction. I got on the phone again. Hello, Rapid Response Contracting? Yeah, I need a crew. Today. Now. I need a commercial-grade solar panel system installed on my roof and connected to a battery array in the basement. I also need a high-capacity water filtration system plumbed into a 5,000-gallon tank I'm having delivered in an hour. What's your emergency call-out fee? That's it? I'll triple it if your crew is here in 60 minutes. I've got all the materials on site. The guy on the other end of the line went silent for a second, probably calculating the bonus. Our guys are on their way, sir. Money didn't just talk, it screamed. And right now, it was screaming, "Build my damn fortress!" The crew that showed up looked like they were expecting a prank. When they saw the mountain of top-of-the-line solar panels and the massive water tank sitting in the parking lot, thanks to my storage space, their jaws tightened with professionalism. This was a serious job. I was paying them a stupid amount of money, so they didn't ask questions. They just worked. I stood in my office, watching them on the security cameras I'd had for years. They worked fast, motivated by the promise of a payday that was probably more than they made in 3 months. Fools. They were installing the very systems that would allow me to live in climate-controlled comfort while they were outside, freezing or starving. But for now, they were useful tools, and I paid my tools well. As the sun began to set, casting long, ominous shadows across the parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was the custom steel manufacturer. Mr. Ryder, your expedited order is ready. A set of 1/4-inch thick, reinforced roll-down steel shutter doors. Where would you like them delivered? I looked out the front window of my store. The glass looked so fragile, so pathetic, it was a gaping wound waiting to happen. Ryder's Mart. Corner of Oak and 12th, I said, a cold smile spreading across my face. Your truck can't be here soon enough. A low rumble echoed down the street. It was a massive flatbed truck, impossibly huge, turning the corner. Strapped to its back were my new front and back doors, gleaming, brutal slabs of metal that looked like they belonged on a military bunker, not a suburban grocery store. The final pieces were in place. The clock was ticking. 1 day, 8 hours left. Let the end of the world begin. I'm ready for the opening night party. And I've got all the snacks. The last of the construction crew drove off into the sunset, pockets fat, with my soon-to-be worthless cash, leaving me with a set of brutally beautiful 1/4-inch steel shutters lying on a pallet. The final puzzle piece. The truck driver who delivered them had just stared. You expecting a war, buddy? The finale, I'd said with a grin. And he just shook his head and got out of there, probably eager to tell his wife about the weirdo grocery store owner. 1 day, 8 hours left. The air was thick with the planet's final moments of denial. I didn't need a crew for this last part. This was personal. Using a heavy-duty engine hoist I'd also bought, because why not? I wrestled the massive steel curtains into place over the front glass entrance and the rear-loading bay door. The screech of metal on metal was a song of security. I spent hours bolting them into their reinforced frames, my muscles screaming, sweat dripping onto the concrete. Every turn of the wrench felt like I was personally hammering a nail into the world's coffin. The last bolt clicked into place, just as the digital clock on the cash register ticked over from 23:59 to 0000, the day of reckoning. Or, for me, opening day. As if on cue, the world outside decided to scream. It started as a single distant wail, a citywide air raid siren that nobody under the age of 70 had ever heard for real. Then came more. A chorus of rising, falling moans from every direction, an ugly orchestra signaling the end of an era. My phone, which had been buzzing with oblivious memes and sports scores all day, suddenly lit up with a P's alert. Presidential Emergency Alert System. Seek shelter immediately. Civil unrest. Do not go outdoors. A little late for that, Chief. The sirens were almost immediately drowned out by a wave of human noise. Screams. Not the kind you hear in a horror movie, but 1,000 voices hitting a note of pure, animal terror all at once. The sound of running feet on asphalt. The pop 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 of a handgun, followed by more screaming. Then a new sound joined the symphony. A wet, guttural, enraged shriek that wasn't human. It was the sound of the rage flu finding its voice. I stood in the center of my silent store, the sound-dampened walls turning the apocalypse into a dull, distant roar. I felt nothing but a profound sense of satisfaction. It was like finishing a billion-piece jigsaw puzzle. Then, a new voice spoke, this one directly inside my head. It was clean, genderless, and impossibly calm, like a high-end GPS. Backquote. Planetary societal collapse detected. Global threat level elevated to apocalypse. Backquote. Backquote. Final conditions met. System binding to quote, 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 quote. Backquote. The ultimate supermarket fortress system is now officially online. Backquote. Backquote. Welcome, owner Alex Rider. Backquote. A semi-transparent blue screen materialized in front of my eyes, visible only to me. It looked like the UI from a slick sci-fi video game. Backquote. System status. Backquote. Backquote owner, Alex Rider. Backquote. Backquote fortress name, RiderSmart default. Backquote. Backquote level 1, flimsy shelter. Backquote. Backquote core feature, daily goods replenishment. Active. Next refresh in 23 hours, 59 minutes and 48 seconds. Backquote. Backquote. Core feature. Absolute master's authority. Active. Backquote core feature. Upgrade and expansion system. Locked. Condition. Survive 24 hours. Backquote. Backquote. Core feature. Personal storage. Active. Usage. 11.7%/100 cubic meters. Backquote. Backquote current survival points. 0. Backquote. I let out a slow breath. It was real. All of it. The rebirth, the premonition, the system. Score 1 for Alex Rider. The chaos outside was hitting its crescendo. I walked over to my little living room setup I'd made in the corner of the store floor. A ridiculously comfy leather sofa I'd ordered online, a 75-inch OLED TV, and a mini fridge. I pulled open the fridge door, grabbed a bottle of ice-cold Belgian ale, and popped the cap. I turned on the TV. Every channel was the same shit show. A terrified-looking news anchor in Denver was trying to hold it together. We are getting unconfirmed reports. I repeat. Unconfirmed. Of widespread violent attacks. It appears to be some kind of riot. Behind her, through the studio's window, you could see pure anarchy. Cars on fire. People running. Then, one of the runners, fast, twitchy, an apex predator in human form, slammed against the glass, its face a mask of blood and mindless fury, before being tackled by what looked like a dozen more. The anchor screamed. The feed cut to static. Damn, I muttered, taking a long, satisfying swig of my beer. Right at the good part. This was better than Netflix. I flicked my eyes back to my system interface. Time to take the new ride for a spin. I focused my thoughts on the lights. Lights off. Instantly, the entire supermarket plunged into darkness, except for the glow of the TV and the hellscape outside. Row 3, lights on. A single aisle of canned beans and pasta was instantly illuminated in perfect fluorescent white. It was flawless. Instantaneous. I felt a jolt of power, a feeling so intoxicating it almost made me laugh out loud. I was a god in this little box. My kingdom. My rules. I left the main lights off and walked toward the front of the store, my footsteps echoing in the quiet. From here, I had a perfect view through the security grate of the roll-down door. The street was the stuff of nightmares. A middle-aged man in a business suit, probably some account manager who was worried about TPS reports 2 hours ago, was being pulled apart by a pack of walkers. They were slow, clumsy, but relentless. They weren't eating him so much as just tearing. It was gruesome, inefficient, and utterly terrifying if you were on the receiving end. For me, it was just a data point. The slow ones were numerous, the fast ones were the real problem. A woman sprinted down the middle of the street, screaming her lungs out, with 3 runners hot on her tail. She was fast. An athlete, maybe? But they were faster. They didn't even slow down as they swarmed her, a blur of motion and a final, choked-off shriek. Bad cardio. Should have trained more, I thought to myself, feeling a complete and total lack of pity. These people were NPCs in my game, and they were failing the tutorial. They'd had their whole lives to prepare, to get stronger, to be less stupid. They chose to argue online and watch reality TV. Darwin was a cruel bastard, and I was on his side. I willed the camera system to activate on my UI. A grid of 16 video feeds appeared in my vision. I could zoom in, switch to thermal, pan, tilt, all with a thought. I focused on camera 4, overlooking the back alley. A small group of people, maybe 5 of them, were trying to pry open the back door of the bakery next door. Idiots. Wrong building. A screamer, a gaunt-looking teenage girl in a torn hoodie, wandered into the alley. She saw the group, tilted her head back, and let out a sound that vibrated through the concrete of my building. It was a high-frequency, ear-splitting shriek that made the fillings in my teeth ache. And then, from every street and alley, they came. Dozens of walkers, their heads snapping toward the sound. The small group's panicked shouts were swallowed by a tide of living death. It was a beautiful, horrifying display of the new food chain. I switched off the camera feed, feeling a bit bored. The initial shock and awe were wearing off. This was the new normal. I casually strolled through the aisles, a king surveying his domain. The shelves were packed to the brim. Cereal, chips, soda, canned fruit, coffee. The meat coolers were full of fresh steaks and chicken. The freezers hummed quietly, stocked with pizzas and ice cream. It was an island of absurd abundance in an ocean of bloody chaos. The contrast was so extreme it was almost funny. While the world outside was being speedrun into extinction, I was contemplating whether I wanted ribeye or a New York strip for my end-of-the-world celebration dinner. My fortress wasn't just a building. It was an extension of me. The steel shutters were my skin. The cameras were my eyes. The electrical grid was my nervous system. I could feel the low hum of the deep cycle batteries in the basement, fully charged by the solar panels the crew had installed just hours ago. I could feel the pressure in the 5,000-gallon water tank, its contents cycling through the multi-stage filter, pure and clean. While people outside would soon kill for a muddy puddle, I could take a hot shower for an hour if I wanted. The first 24 hours would be the great filter. The weak, the unprepared, the panicky, the terminally stupid, they'd all be wiped out. A global cleansing. It was a tragedy for them, but for me, it was just population control. It thinned the herd of potential competitors. I was leaning against the deli counter, mentally debating the merits of prosciutto versus salami for a late-night sandwich, when a new notification pinged on my system UI. The text was highlighted in a menacing red. Back quote. Warning, pre-life nemesis units detected in proximity. Back quote. Back quote. Targets, Kevin Betrayer, Jessica, Betrayer. Back quote. Back quote. Status, approaching fortress perimeter. Distance, 200 meters and closing. Back quote. I looked up from my mental charcuterie board. Through my camera feed, I zoomed in on the end of the street. And there they were. Kevin, my best friend, was half carrying Jessica, the girl I once would have died for. They looked pathetic. Kevin had a baseball bat, and Jessica was sobbing, her designer clothes ripped and dirty. They were running, looking over their shoulders, heading straight for the one place they knew had supplies. Straight for Ryder's Mart. Straight to me. A slow, predatory smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had just watched his prey, wounded and terrified, stumble right into the crosshairs. The board was set. The pieces were moving. Let the games begin. Day 1 of the apocalypse. Maybe hour 3. The novelty was wearing off. The initial thrill of watching society collapse on a 75-inch screen was giving way to a new kind of entertainment. Live-action drama, streaming exclusively to my fortress's security cameras. And oh my, the lead actors had just arrived. The pounding started as a frantic, muffled thudding against the quarter-inch steel of my front shutters. It wasn't the slow, mindless thump of a walker. This was the fast, desperate rhythm of human terror. Back quote. Alex, are you in there? It's me, Kevin. Open up, man. Please. Back quote. His voice, tinny and distorted through the layers of steel, was music to my ears. I didn't even get up from my ridiculously comfortable leather sofa. With a thought, I patched the external front door microphone through to the surround sound speakers I'd set up around my little living area. The pathetic sound of his pleading filled the store. I took a slow sip of my Belgian ale, the condensation cool against my hand. On the screen, which was now a split view of all 16 cameras, I zoomed in on camera 1. There they were, illuminated by the flickering streetlights and the distant glow of a burning gas station. Kevin, my former best friend, looking like a drowned rat. His trendy haircut was plastered to his forehead with sweat and grime. The baseball bat he was holding looked comically oversized in his trembling hands. And next to him, clinging to his arm like a designer barnacle, was Jessica, the love of my past life. Her expensive yoga pants were torn at the knee, and a smear of dirt marred her cheek, which was currently wet with tears. She looked genuinely terrified, which was the only genuine thing about her. Back quote. Alex, please. For God's sake, we're gonna die out here. Back quote, she shrieked, her voice a high-pitched whine that probably attracted every walker within a 2-block radius. My inner monologue was having a field day. Oh look, it's the cast of Betrayal the Dumpster Fire edition. Are they here for an audition? Because their performance is trash. I casually flicked my attention back to the system U. I floating in my vision. System, activate external speaker. Testing, testing. 1, 2. My voice, calm and amplified, boomed out into the chaotic street. They both jumped, looking up at the speaker box above the shuttered entrance like it was the voice of God. Kevin, Jessica, is that you? I asked, injecting just the right amount of feigned surprise and concern into my tone. What's going on? There was a peas alert. I thought it was just a riot. This was my stage. I was the writer, director, and sole audience member. Kevin's face flooded with relief. The idiot actually thought I was clueless. Back quote. Alex. Thank God. It's a nightmare, man. People, they're going crazy. They're eating each other. You have to let us in. Back quote. I leaned back and put my feet up on a case of sparkling water. This was premium content. Then, Jessica started her performance. She pushed away from Kevin and stumbled forward, pressing her hands against the cold steel shutter. The 4K camera picked up every detail of her distraught expression. The artfully quivering lip. The wide, pleading eyes. She deserved an Oscar for this. Back quote, Alex. Back quote. Her voice dropped to a choked, dramatic whisper. Back quote. I was so worried about you. When everything started, you were the only person I could think of. Back quote. Bruh. The cringe was real. Back quote. We ran all the way here. Back quote. She sobbed, conveniently leaving out which direction they were running from. Back quote. I knew you'd be safe. You're always so prepared. So smart. Back quote. I almost snorted my beer. Oh, now I'm smart? In my past life, I was the sweet but naive sucker who was too dumb to see a snake when it was coiled around my own heart. Back quote. Please, Alex. Back quote, she continued, tears now streaming freely. Back quote. I have to confess something. I've always had feelings for you. I was just too scared to say it. Kevin, he pressured me. He was always jealous of you. I never wanted to be with him. Back quote. Wow. No cap, she threw him under the bus so fast he probably got whiplash. I glanced at Kevin on the monitor. His face was a mixture of outrage and desperation. He opened his mouth to protest, but Jessica shot him a look so venomous it could probably kill a small animal. He wisely shut up. He knew this was their only ticket. Kevin took over, playing the repentant fool. Back quote. She's right, man. I was a dick. I was jealous. But we're past that. Let us in, and I'll be your right-hand man. I'll do anything. I'll take out the trash. I'll clean the floors. I'll fight for you. Just please, don't leave us out here. Back quote. I finished my beer and set the empty bottle down with a soft clink. While they were delivering their heartfelt monologues to a sheet of metal, I was getting a little bored. Time to spice up the scene. System. Activate front door floodlights. 50% intensity. 2 powerful LED floodlights I'd installed under the awning flickered to life, bathing them in a stark white light. They flinched and shielded their eyes. Now they were truly on stage, the darkness of the apocalypse their backdrop. The light made their dirty, terrified faces look even more pathetic. It was a beautiful sight. It's really bad out there? I asked, my voice laced with manufactured hesitation. I was enjoying this power trip way too much. The power to give hope, and the power to snatch it away. Back quote. Bad isn't the word, Alex. It's the end of the world. Back quote. Kevin yelled, gesturing wildly at the street behind them, where a trio of walkers was clumsily tearing into what used to be a mailman. The gruesome scene, perfectly framed behind him, really added to the production value. I pretended to mull it over. In reality, I was using the system interface to check my inventory. Let's see. 247 boxes of Pop-Tarts, 88 barrels of coffee beans, 500 pounds of prime-grade ribeye steak. Yeah, I think I can spare some pity. Not. But the front door, the mechanism is new. It's slow. If I open it now, those things... I let my voice trail off, painting a picture of a horde of zombies, swarming in during the 10 seconds it would take the giant steel shutter to roll up. Let them stew in that image. Let them feel that spike of hope, followed by the cold dread of reality. Their faces fell. The elation of finding me was replaced by the horror of my, quote, predicament. Back quote. No, no, there has to be another way. Jessica pleaded. Her act was starting to crack. The desperation was becoming less theatrical and more authentic. A back door? A window? Anything. A slow, predatory smile spread across my face, a smile they couldn't see. My kingdom, my rules, my game. This was the moment. The turning point in their little tragic play. The moment the benevolent God they were praying to reveals he's actually a devil with a playbook. While they were freaking out, I mentally scrolled through my options. I could just leave him out there. Let Darwin do his thing. It would be simple, clean. But where's the fun in that? Where's the payback? No, death was too good for them. They gave me a death filled with agony and betrayal. I owed them an experience far, far worse. An experience built on hope, crushed by despair, and seasoned with the terror of their own making. I let them stand there in the cold, under the harsh glare of the floodlights, for a full 30 seconds of silence. Long enough for them to hear the distant screams and the nearby groans. Long enough for the hope to curdle into true fear. Finally, I spoke again, my voice a lifeline thrown to two drowning rats. Okay, calm down, let me think, I said, as if I hadn't already had a plan from the moment the system pinged their location. There is another way. The loading bay in the back, in the alley. You could literally see the tension drain from their shoulders. Yes, the loading bay, Kevin shouted, his voice cracking with relief. We'll go there. We'll go right now, Listen to me carefully, I commanded, my tone turning serious. The alley is narrower. It should have fewer of those things. The door there is a smaller, reinforced steel door, not a giant shutter. It's faster to open. But I need to bypass some of the new security wiring I just installed. It's not as simple as flipping a switch. I was feeding them a story they wanted to believe. A perfect blend of technical jargon and logistical problems that made their rescue seem difficult but plausible. Go to the back alley. Get to the loading bay door. Give me 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes. I'll have the door unlocked from here. Be ready. It will only be open for a few seconds. Do you understand? Yes, we understand. Jessica cried, laughing and sobbing at the same time. Thank you, Alex. Thank you. We won't forget this. I won't forget this. Oh, I know you won't. I'm going to make sure of that. On my monitor, I watched them turn and sprint away from the main entrance, scrambling down the street and turning the corner towards the back alley. They were running with the giddy energy of people who had just been pulled from the gallows. I turned off the floodlights and the external speaker. The sudden silence in my fortress was profound. I stood up from the sofa and stretched, a feeling of deep, bone-deep satisfaction washing over me. The board was set. The mice were scurrying towards the cheese. Now it was time to check the springs on the trap. I walked towards the back warehouse, my System U, already displaying the camera feed for the alley. In my mind, I was already spending the 0 survival points I had, but the points I was about to farm from this little experiment in poetic justice, those were going to be sweet. I had 10 minutes, more than enough time to prepare their welcome party. 10 minutes. To a drowning man, 10 minutes is an eternity. To the condemned on death row, it's a blink. To me, it was just the right amount of time to pour myself another drink. I opted for a fine Kentucky bourbon this time, neat. I deserved it. My directorial debut was about to premiere. I sauntered from my comfy little living room setup, past aisles of pristine, fully stocked shelves, and into the back warehouse. The warehouse itself was my new command center. I'd spent the last 72 hours hooking up a server rack, a couple of monitors, and a comfortable gaming chair. It was a work in progress, but for now, it was my private little theater. On the main screen, Camera 12 showed a perfect, high-definition view of the back alley. The alley was a classic. Narrow, grimy, overflowing with dumpsters from the neighboring diner, and ending in a brick wall. A perfect little kill box. Just as my mental timer hit the 2-minute mark, they stumbled into view. Kevin, breathing heavily, still clutching that stupid baseball bat like it was Excalibur, and Jessica, clinging to him, her face a mask of frantic relief. They'd made it. They actually thought they were safe. The level of brain-dead optimism was almost impressive. We're here. We made it. Kevin panted. His voice a faint whisper picked up by the high-sensitivity microphone I'd installed right above the loading bay door. Jessica leaned against the grimy wall, trying to catch her breath. I knew it. She gasped, a triumphant little smile playing on her lips. I knew Alex wouldn't abandon us. He's always been a good person. My internal monologue nearly made me choke on my bourbon. Good person? Lady, the good person you knew died 3 days ago in a past life, thanks to you. You're currently talking to the upgrade. Alex 2.0. Now with 100% less bullshit tolerance. They huddled by the reinforced steel door, peering into the darkness of the alley, flinching at every distant sound. The 10-minute wait was doing its job, letting their adrenaline subside and replacing it with a gnawing, anxious dread. Perfect. You need the low point to make the next part really pop. Kevin glanced at his watch. Should be any minute now. He muttered, more to himself than to her. Jessica took the opportunity to slide away from him, moving closer to the door, as if to distance herself from the man she'd just been using as a human shield. Kevin, when we get in, let me talk to Alex alone first, okay? She said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He's clearly still into me. I can handle him. We'll be set for life in there. The sheer audacity. My God, this performance was even better than the one out front. That moron Kevin just nodded dumbly, too terrified and exhausted to comprehend he was being demoted from co-conspirator to expendable baggage right before my very eyes. My own watch ticked over. 10 minutes. Showtime. I tapped a virtual button on my system interface. Activate loading bay floodlight Cerberus protocol. It wasn't just a light. It was a 200,000 lumen military-grade floodlight I'd salvaged from an auction and mounted 20 feet up on the wall. I'd nicknamed it the Sun God for a reason. Wump VVVVRRRRRR. A low hum vibrated through the alley as the generator kicked in, followed by a sudden, world-ending blast of pure white light. The alley, once pitch black, was now illuminated with the intensity of a movie set. Every greasy stain on the pavement, every piece of rotting garbage, every terrified pore on their faces was visible in excruciating detail. Kevin and Jessica cried out, staggering back and throwing their arms up to shield their eyes. They thought this was the prelude to their rescue. The grand reveal. He's opening it. Kevin yelled, his voice filled with stupid, beautiful hope. The light and the hum, however, were not just for dramatic effect. They were a dinner bell. A massive, screaming, unmissable dinner bell for every single walker within a quarter-mile radius. On my other monitors, I saw it happening in real time. The slow, shambling figures in the main street, their heads snapping in the direction of the alley. The ones down the block, beginning a clumsy, lurching run. From the darkness at the end of the alley, a new sound began to emerge. A low, guttural, collective groan. Kevin and Jessica lowered their arms, eyes blinking to adjust. Their expressions of relief slowly began to curdle as they saw the first silhouettes lurching into the mouth of the alley. Then my voice, amplified by the same speaker they were huddled under, cut through the air. It was calm, clear, and as cold as the grave. Kevin, Jessica. They both jumped, looking up at the speaker, their faces a mess of confusion. Alex, what's going on? Open the door. They're coming! Jessica's voice was a frantic shriek. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my bourbon, savoring the moment. This was it. The climax. The whole reason for the elaborate little play. In my last life, I said, my voice echoing in the narrow space, you two convinced me to open my doors. Then you broke my legs and threw me outside to them, just so you could have a little more time to steal my food. You laughed as they ate me alive. A profound silence fell over the alley, broken only by the approaching moans of the dead. I watched their faces on the monitor. The confusion turned to utter disbelief, then to dawning, soul-crushing horror. They understood. Oh, they finally understood. Alex. What? What are you talking about? Are you crazy? Kevin stammered, his face ashen. Crazy? No, I'm just equitable, I replied smoothly. You threw me to the zombies. I'm not going to do that to you. That's barbaric. I'm simply turning on a light so the zombies can find you. Consider it a housewarming party. For them, Jessica's face crumpled. The mask of the conniving actress shattered, revealing the pathetic, terrified creature beneath. A sound tore from her throat, a high, thin wail of pure terror that was music to my ears. No, Alex, please, you can't do this. Oh, I can, I said, leaning back in my chair. And to make the party more interesting, I even invited a few special guests. Hope you two can run fast. Just as I said that, the first of the new breed entered the alley. It wasn't a walker. It was low to the ground, moving with a twitchy, unnatural speed. A runner. Its eyes glowed with a faint, predatory light, and it sprinted forward, its jaw unhinged. The regular walkers were the crowd. This thing was the main event. The scene descended into chaos. Kevin let out a terrified yell and swung his bat wildly, connecting with the first walker's head with a wet crunch. But there were more behind it. Jessica, her survival instincts finally kicking in, shoved Kevin towards the approaching mob and tried to scramble up one of the dumpsters. The karma was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I found it all a bit noisy, so I muted the external audio feed. Instead, I prompted the store's internal sound system. System playlist. Vengeance for Dummies. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony began to fill my command center. The dramatic strings and powerful horns were the perfect soundtrack for the carnage unfolding on my screens. I watched, sipping my bourbon, as the two people who had destroyed my life were systematically torn apart. Kevin, the backstabbing best friend, was swarmed in seconds. He went down swinging his stupid bat, his screams silenced by a dozen hungry mouths. Good riddance. Jessica, the black-hearted love of my life, almost made it to the top of the dumpster. But the new runner was insanely agile. It leaped, its claws digging into her designer yoga pants, and dragged her down. Her final moments were a frantic, flailing mess of limbs and terror, right in the center of the brilliant white spotlight. A star, to the very end. It was a beautiful, tragic opera, and I had the only ticket. When the last of her screams had faded from memory, since I'd muted the audio, the show was over. The zombies milled about, feasting. The spotlight continued to shine down, a monument to a debt paid in full. A pleasant little chime sounded in my head, cutting through Beethoven's crescendo. Hidden quest completed, the first revenge. You have demonstrated cold-blooded resolve and executed a flawless plan against those who wronged you. Your path is set. Reward, 200 survival points. A smile touched my lips. 200 points. Not a bad haul for taking out the trash. I brought up the system's upgrade menu. Level 1 wall reinforcement, 500 SP. Automatic turret. Basic, 1000 SP. It was a start. A damn good start. I let the scene in the alley play out for another 10 minutes before shutting off the floodlight. Darkness and the sounds of chewing reclaimed the alley. My work here was done. The ghosts of my past were exorcised. A weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted. I turned my attention to the other cameras, doing a routine sweep of the perimeter. The chaos in the back alley had drawn most of the immediate threats away. The street out front was relatively quiet. Except for one thing. Across the street, in the shadows of the porch of the Miller house, I saw movement. Old Man Miller, the neighborhood busybody. Next to him was Mrs. Henderson from 2 doors down, clutching her pearls like she was about to witness a scandal. A few other familiar faces from the neighborhood were there, peeking out from behind curtains or cars. They had heard the generator. They had seen the light. They had probably heard the screams. And now, they were all staring at my store. Writer's Mart. The one building on the block that was silent, dark, and utterly unharmed. I zoomed in on their faces. I didn't see fear. I saw something far more dangerous. I saw the hungry, calculating glint of envy. The gears were turning in their little heads. He's got power, he's got supplies, he's safe, he has to share. The first revenge was over. It was clean, personal, but I had a feeling the next chapter of my story was going to be a lot messier. The rats were gone, but now the vultures were beginning to circle. Day 1 of the new world, and the entertainment was already better than anything Netflix had ever produced. The ghosts of Kevin and Jessica were still being squeegeed off the pavement in the back alley, but a new species of vermin had already gathered out front. I watched them on camera 3, the one giving me a crisp, wide-angle shot of the parking lot. The Neighborhood Watch Committee, or as I like to call them, the Council of Entitled Idiots. They were all there. Old Man Miller, squinting like a confused gnome, the Hendersons, clutching each other as if a strong breeze would carry them off to Oz, and a handful of other faces I recognized from tedious town meetings. Their queen, the final boss of all homeowners associations, was a woman named Brenda. Brenda, who'd once tried to get me fined because the shade of white on my storefront was aggressively off-standard. Today, she had traded her clipboard for a battery-powered megaphone. A truly terrifying upgrade. I leaned back in my gaming chair, took a long pull from a bottle of ice-cold cherry soda, and cranked up the external microphone feed. Let's see what sage wisdom Brenda the Barbarian had for us today. Alex Ryder! Her voice, tinny and amplified, scraped against the evening air. We know you're in there. We saw the lights. We heard the commotion. Commotion? Lady, that was the sound of karmic justice being served piping hot. You should be thanking me for the free pest control. This is a community, Alex, she droned on, pacing in front of my glorious, impenetrable steel roll-up door. In times of crisis, a community pulls together. We share what we have. It's our moral duty. A few of the other morons nodded sagely, their faces grim and righteous. Oh, this was rich. These were the same people who'd let their dog crap on my lawn for years and reported me for having a commercial van parked in my own lot after 9 p.m. Their sense of community was a one-way street, and I was pretty sure I owned the only toll booth. You have a whole supermarket in there, Alex, she continued, her voice rising with indignation. Food, water, medicine. There are children out here, old people. Are you going to let us starve while you sit on your mountain of plenty? The For the Children card. Classic. Never fails. She gestured dramatically toward a couple of kids huddled near their parents, looking more bored than scared. The performance was a solid 7/10. She'd clearly been binge-watching post-apocalyptic dramas. I didn't answer. Answering would validate her little power trip. It would give her an audience. No, I was a director, not an actor in someone else's low-budget play. My productions had higher standards. Instead, I had a better idea. A much, much better idea. I went to the main floor. The pristine aisles were silent beacons of delicious, consumerist glory. I strolled over to the butcher's counter. The system had refilled it at midnight, and a gorgeous, 2-inch thick T-bone steak was just sitting there, practically calling my name. I grabbed it, along with a bottle of decent Cabernet Sauvignon from aisle 7. Back in my command center, I fired up the small portable grill I'd liberated from the seasonal aisle. A few minutes later, the smell of sizzling beef filled the warehouse. I cooked it to a perfect medium rare, the fat crisping up beautifully. I plated it, poured myself a generous glass of wine, and sat down in my chair. Then I executed my master plan. I had a high-lumen, short-throw projector I bought for movie nights that never happened. I plugged it into my server, dragged a video file from my phone onto the desktop, and aimed the projector at the inside of the main roll-up door. With a tap on my system interface, I broadcasted the image. Backquote. System command project video file. Steak_night_FOMO.mp 4 feet onto exterior surface alpha. Backquote. Outside, the blank steel door flickered to life. It became a giant, 20-foot wide movie screen. And the feature presentation was me. On the screen, a larger-than-life Alex Ryder, that's me, sat comfortably in a plush chair. The shot was framed perfectly to show the well-lit, fully stocked shelves behind me. I raised my wine glass in a toast to the camera, took a leisurely sniff, and then a sip. Then, with practiced ease, I picked up a steak knife and fork and sliced into the T-bone. The camera zoomed in as I lifted the perfectly pink, juicy piece of meat to my mouth. Outside, Brenda's sermon cut off mid-sentence. The silence was deafening, even through the microphone. I could picture their faces perfectly. The confusion. The disbelief. The slow burn of pure, unadulterated rage. I watched them on the monitor. Old Man Miller's jaw was on the floor. Mrs. Henderson looked like she'd just been personally slapped by Jesus. Brenda's face went through a spectacular color palette, from pale white to blotchy red, and finally settling on a deep, furious purple. Is he eating steak? Some guy in the back yelled, his voice cracking with outrage. The simple, undeniable truth of it seemed to break the dam. The crowd erupted. It wasn't the sound of fear or desperation. It was the shriek of pure, entitled fury. It was the sound of people who fundamentally believe they are owed a piece of whatever you have, being shown in the most blatant way possible that they were getting absolutely nothing. You son of a bitch! Open the damn door, you monster! Their moral high ground had evaporated in the face of a perfectly seared T-bone. Their carefully constructed narrative of a poor, huddled community being denied its rights by a selfish hoarder was instantly replaced by the raw, ugly truth. They were just jealous. They were hungry, and I wasn't. They were scared, and I was safe. And I was rubbing it in their faces on a screen the size of a billboard. I took another bite of steak, savoring the flavor and the victory. This was better than the wine. While they were probably rationing stale crackers and praying for rain they could boil, I was having a 5-star meal. The contrast wasn't just satisfying, it was a necessary lesson. In this new world, you don't beg, you don't demand, and you certainly don't try to guilt-trip the guy with all the food and a fortress. After letting the video loop a few more times, just to really let it sink in, I shut the projector off. The steel door went blank again, leaving them staring at their own pathetic reflections. The show was over. They could go home. I finished my meal, feeling a profound sense of peace. The ghosts of the past were gone, and the clowns of the present had been put in their place. A pleasant chime echoed in my mind. Backquote, community interaction subquest completed. The Sermon on the Mount. Backquote. Backquote. You have successfully asserted dominance and dismantled a moral argument using superior resources and psychological warfare. Backquote. Backquote. Reward. 100 survival points. Backquote. Nice. Easy points. Combined with the 200 from Kevin and Jessica's back alley opera, I had a total of 300 SP. It was time to go shopping. I pulled up the system upgrade menu. The options were tantalizing. Turrets, electrified fences, even a small hydroponics bay. But first things first. You build a house from the foundation up. Backquote. Upgrade selection. Level 1 wall and door reinforcement. Backquote. Backquote. Cost. 250 survival points. Confirm? YN backquote. I hit Y without a second thought. Backquote. Upgrading. Backquote. A faint blue light, invisible to anyone but me, washed over the entire building. It felt like a low hum vibrating in my bones. It seeped into the concrete, flowed through the steel door, and coated the windows in the upstairs office. Backquote. Upgrade complete. Building durability increased by 200%. A thin layer of Spectre-class alloy has been integrated into all exterior surfaces, resistant to small arms fire and blunt force trauma. Backquote. A wave of absolute security washed over me. My fortress was now, officially, a fortress. Let them throw rocks. Let them try to ram it with a truck. They'd have better luck trying to punch their way through a mountain. As if on cue, the world decided to remind me why this was such a good investment. A soft tink sound started against the roof. Rain. I glanced at the monitors. The crowd outside was starting to scatter, pulling hoods over their heads. But something was off. A wisp of faint, greenish smoke rose from wherever a raindrop hit the asphalt. Old Man Miller, slower than the rest, let out a yelp. He frantically started swatting at his arm where a few drops had landed on his thin jacket. Small holes were beginning to smoke and sizzle in the fabric. I zoomed in. It was acid rain, the first of the Gaian B-side disasters. The story Bible in my head said this initial wave wouldn't be strong enough to melt steel, but it would ruin clothes, cause nasty chemical burns on exposed skin, and, most importantly, contaminate any and all open water sources. Brenda and her posse scrambled for cover under the awning of the closed-down laundromat across the street, shrieking as the rain singed their clothes and hair. They looked up at my store, silent, solid, and dry, with a new expression in their eyes. The jealous anger was still there, but now it was mixed with a fresh, potent dose of fear and desperation. The world was actively trying to kill them now, and I was sitting in the only ark in sight. I watched them huddle together, their righteous indignation washed away by the literal acid from the sky. Brenda was no longer shouting. She was whispering, her head close to two of the nastier-looking guys from the crowd. The kind of guys who looked like they knew how to use a crowbar for more than just opening crates. Their faces were grim, their gazes shifting from each other to my invincible-looking store. They weren't making speeches anymore. They were making plans. The dumb, loud approach had failed spectacularly. Now the rats were getting clever. I smirked and finished my wine. Let them plot. This was way more fun than running a failing convenience store. The apocalypse was turning out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. The end of day one in this brave new world, and the entertainment just kept on giving. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the last of the Cabernet in my glass like some B-movie villain, watching the live feed from camera 6. It had a perfect high-angle view of the laundromat across the street, complete with thermal imaging. My little flock of angry sheep was still huddled under its flimsy awning, looking like wet, miserable cats. The acid rain was coming down harder now, a steady, corrosive drizzle that made the asphalt steam. Brenda the Barbarian was in her element, which is to say, she was quarterbacking a truly terrible plan. I could practically see the gears grinding in her head, rusted from years of disuse and HOA complaints. My steak and wine movie night had backfired on her PR campaign. The poor, starving community angle was dead. Now, pure, unadulterated greed had taken the wheel. They weren't trying to appeal to my better nature anymore. A fatal flaw, since I didn't have one. They were moving on to criminal trespass. So much for community spirit. I watched as she jabbed a finger towards my roof. Her two prize goons, the guys who looked like they'd failed the tryouts for a biker gang, nodded grimly. One of them, a big slab of muscle stuffed into a too-tight affliction t-shirt, pointed at the fire escape on the adjacent derelict office building. Ah, the classic rooftop entry. The most overused trope in every heist movie ever. Did these people really think my fortress, my divinely sanctioned temple of consumer goods, had a weakness as cliché as an unguarded roof? It was almost insulting. Internal monologue. Seriously? The roof? What are you gonna do, pry open a skylight with a crowbar? Did you not just see me turn the front door into an IMAX theater? You think I forgot to lock the chimney? This was gonna be fun. I didn't even have to get out of my chair. I toggled the camera view, switching to the rooftop feed. The brand new solar panels gleamed under the security lights, surrounded by a simple, almost elegant-looking chain-link fence. It looked mundane, unassuming, exactly as I'd intended. It was the digital equivalent of putting a "Beware of Dog" sign on a cage holding a T-Rex. The two wannabe thugs, let's call them Dumb and Dumber, separated from the group. Dumber gave Brenda a thumbs up that radiated false confidence. They scurried across the street, ducking their heads as the acid rain sizzled on their jackets. I watched them approach the fire escape of the next building. It was old, rusty, and probably hadn't been inspected since the Carter administration. A perfect choice for a couple of overweight morons in a hurry. Dumber went first. The metal ladder groaned under his weight, screaming in protest. Every step he took was a gamble with tetanus. He managed to haul his bulk onto the first landing, breathing heavily. Dumb wasn't far behind. Their grand ascent was less Mission Impossible and more Two Stooges climb a thing. It was excruciatingly slow and deeply pathetic. I took a sip of my wine and brought up a small window on my monitor, playing a lo-fi beat stream. A man needs the right ambiance for this kind of work. After what felt like an eternity of wheezing and clanging, they finally made it to the roof of the adjacent building. They crouched low, thinking they were being stealthy, and peered over the parapet at my rooftop, just a few feet away. It was a simple jump. Dumber, clearly the alpha of their two-man wolf pack, patted his partner on the shoulder. He took a running start, a three-step shuffle, really, and leaped across the gap. He landed on my roof with a heavy thud that probably would have cracked the tar paper on a normal building. My system-reinforced roof didn't even notice. He was in. The enemy was on the beach. He stood up, puffed out his chest, and looked back at his partner with a triumphant smirk. He was the hero of his own story, the man who would bring back bread and Pop-Tarts to the huddled masses. What a guy. He crept towards the solar panel installation, pulling a massive pair of bolt cutters from a loop on his jeans. The plan was probably to snip the fence, get to the roof access hatch, and then what? Be met by me with a fire axe? These people didn't think more than one step ahead. I let him get close. Let him feel that surge of victory. Let his hand, holding the bolt cutters, touch the deceptively simple chain-link fence. His fingers made contact with the metal. From my command center, I sent a single, simple thought. Backquote. System command, activate perimeter defense grid. Level 1, non-lethal deterrent. Backquote. There was no sound, no flash of light. But on my thermal camera, the fence Dumber was touching suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. The big man's body went completely rigid. The triumphant smirk on his face was flash-frozen into a rictus of confused agony. His muscles convulsed violently, turning his tough guy swagger into a grotesque, jerky dance. A sound like a plugged-in hot dog hitting a wet floor sizzled in the rain. He started to vibrate, his teeth chattering so hard I was surprised they didn't shatter. Then came the foam. Little white bubbles frothed at the corners of his mouth. His partner, Dumb, watched from the other roof, his jaw hanging open in pure horror. The crowd below, who had been watching with bated breath, let out a collective gasp. Brenda's hand flew to her mouth. The show wasn't over. After a solid 5-second jolt, Dumber's body went limp. The bolt cutters clattered to the roof. He stumbled backward, his legs doing a weird noodle dance, before his eyes rolled back in his head and he flopped over, twitching like a landed fish. It was poetic. Glorious. A perfect 10 out of 10 for execution. And now, for the commentary. I keyed the external loudspeaker. Backquote. System command, broadcast audio. External. Backquote. My voice, calm and detached, boomed out over the hissing rain, clear as a bell. Attention shoppers, I began, channeling my inner game show host. It seems our first contestant has failed the physical challenge. A reminder of the house rules. Touching my property without permission is frowned upon. A wave of terror washed over the small crowd. Dumb, still on the other roof, looked like he'd seen a ghost. He scrambled backward, away from the edge, slipping and sliding on the slick, rain-soaked surface. That was the warning shot, I continued, letting a hint of amusement creep into my voice. A friendly, non-lethal, 10,000-volt reminder to stay off my lawn. The next person who tries something this monumentally stupid will be introduced to the extra crispy setting. And trust me, you don't want that. I paused to let it sink in. In this new world, there are two main currencies, resources and intelligence. You have neither. Trying to steal from me is not brave. It's a symptom of a terminal case of foolishness. And I am the cure. Now, get your twitching friend, and go home. Silence. Utter, terrified silence. Not even the acid rain dared to make a sound. The standoff was over. The moral posturing, the threats, the half-baked plans, all of it was incinerated by a simple application of overwhelming force and public humiliation. Two other men from the crowd, looking terrified, scurried over to the base of the fire escape. Dum eventually mustered the courage to drag his unconscious partner back across the gap, a truly pathetic sight, and they somehow managed to lower him to the street. They hauled him away like a sack of potatoes, his legs dragging on the ground. Brenda stood there for a moment longer, her face a mask of hate and impotence. She shot one last venomous glare at my silent, monolithic storefront before turning and herding her defeated flock into the night. The moment they were gone, a familiar, pleasant chime echoed in my skull. Back quote. Active defense successful, rooftop incursion repelled. Back quote. Back quote. You have effectively demonstrated the consequences of underestimating your security. Enemy morale crushed. Back quote. Back quote. Reward. 50 survival points. Back quote. Sweet. That brought my grand total to 350 SP. The wall reinforcement was a good start, but this little episode showed me the value of proactive defense. Sitting here and waiting for idiots to hurt themselves on my toys was grade A entertainment, but it was reactive. I needed to think bigger. I pulled up the system's upgrade menu again, scrolling past the basics. Back quote. Security upgrades, Tier 2, back quote. Back quote. Sentry turret, ballistic. Requires workshop, LVL1, cost 800 SP, back quote. Back quote. Concealed sonic emitter, stuns and disorients targets in a designated area, cost 600 SP, back quote. Back quote. AI enhanced surveillance. Automatically tags and tracks threats, predicts movement. Cost 450 SP, back quote. Back quote. Moat with sharks joking. Cost 9,999,999 SP, back quote. The system had a sense of humor. I almost respected that. The AI-enhanced surveillance looked tempting. Knowing where the cockroaches were before they even started crawling towards my house sounded like a solid investment. But that could wait. For now, my message had been sent, loud and clear. The acid rain continued to pour throughout the night. By morning, the world outside looked different. The paint on the laundromat sign across the street was peeling and bubbling, the wood on its porch drooping like wet cardboard. The metal mailboxes on the corner were pitted and streaked with rust. My fortress, with its Spectre-class alloy coating, remained pristine, untouched. Every hissing drop that landed on its surface was another testament to my foresight. I was safe. I was dry. I was in charge. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, Colombian Supremo from aisle 4, and did my morning rounds on the camera system. The street was empty. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a world that looked like it had been scoured with chemicals. Then I saw them. Far down the street, parked near the highway on-ramp, was a battered-looking van. Standing beside it were 3 individuals. Unlike Brenda's sorry-ass committee, these guys were different. They weren't wearing khakis and windbreakers. They wore patched-up leather and denim, and they carried themselves with a slouching confidence that spoke of casual violence. One of them was holding a pair of binoculars, looking directly at my store. They weren't whispering or panicking. They were observing. Assessing. The morons had been routed. Now, it looked like the jackals were coming to check out the lion's den. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, a smirk spreading across my face. Showtime. Day 7 of the end times, and the local wildlife was getting bolder. The battered van was still there, a rusty sentinel at the edge of my kingdom. The jackals. For 3 days, they just sat there, watching. They were a different breed from Brenda's homeowners association from hell. Those clowns were reactive, emotional, and blessedly stupid. These guys were patient. Patience in this new world was a far more dangerous commodity than a pair of bolt cutters. It got me thinking. My fortress was perfect, a self-contained paradise of processed cheese and central air conditioning. But it was a static defense, a turtle shell. And history has proven that if you give a monkey enough time, it will eventually figure out how to crack a turtle shell with a rock, even if it takes a few tries. Sitting here, playing whack-a-mole with every brain-dead looter who got a bright idea, was fun, sure. But it wasn't a long-term strategy. It was a holding pattern. I wasn't just here to survive. I was here to rule. And rulers don't hide in their castles. They project power. They set the rules of the game outside their walls. The light bulb went on. Why bring the fight to them when I could make them bring their wallets to me? I wasn't a bunker prepper. I was the CEO of the apocalypse's only functioning Walmart. It was time to open for business. I pulled up the system menu. My little shock therapy stunt on the roof had landed me a cool 50 SP, bringing my total to a respectable 350. Not enough for a sentry turret, but plenty for some infrastructure. I bypassed the flashy weapon upgrades and scrolled to a tab I'd ignored until now. Backquote. Territorial control and logistics. Backquote. It was beautiful. Backquote. Available structure, safe trade zone. Tier 1 backquote. Backquote. Description. Establishes a designated, system-enforced neutral ground for controlled bartering. Owner sets all rules and transaction terms. Backquote. Backquote. Features basic physical barriers. A single system-controlled entry/exit point. Automated contraband detection. Firearms/explosives. Backquote. Backquote. Cost, 200 survival points. Backquote. Bingo. This wasn't just a feature. It was a paradigm shift. I was about to go from being the biggest prize in town to being the damn casino. The house always wins. Backquote. System command. Purchase and deploy. Safe trade zone. Tier 1 foot in designated area. Front parking lot zone A. Backquote. Backquote. Confirm? YN backquote. I slammed the mental Y button so hard, it should have left a crater. Outside, the world shifted. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was something far more terrifying. It was quiet, efficient construction. From the asphalt of my parking lot, 3-foot-high concrete barriers, the kind you see on highways, simply rose. They pushed up through the cracked pavement, smooth as butter, forming a neat, 100-foot square enclosure in front of my store. One section remained open, a 10-foot gap that was now the only way in. A heavy-duty, retractable steel bollard rose from the ground in the middle of that gap, acting as a gate. The whole thing looked sterile, official, and utterly non-negotiable. The display in my head chimed. Backquote. Safe trade zone established. Current status closed. Awaiting owner's command to open. Backquote. Backquote. 150 SP remaining. Backquote. The jackals in the van must have been having a collective aneurysm. One moment they were scoping out a supermarket, the next, it was building its own damn border wall. I saw one of them practically drop his binoculars. Good. Let them be confused. Let them be afraid. Now for the grand opening announcement. Backquote. System command, broadcast audio, external, maximum volume. Backquote. My voice, amplified by the system to the level of a rock concert, blasted across the silent, ruined town. Good morning, survivors of Denver. I boomed, using my best corporate PR voice. Riders Mart is now open for business. That's right, you heard me. We are announcing the launch of the Riders Trade Post, your one-stop shop for not dying. I let that sink in. The silence that answered was profound. Here's how it works, you miserable sacks of flesh. The newly constructed area in front of my store is a safe trade zone. One at a time. No weapons. No funny business. I have everything you need. Food, water, batteries, medical supplies, the good stuff. In exchange, I want things. I took a sip of my coffee, timing the pause for dramatic effect. My shopping list is as follows. Scrap metal, copper, steel, aluminum, working electronics, laptops, circuit boards, car batteries, solar panels, ammunition, any and all calibers, medications, prescription grade, and most importantly, information. Reliable intel on zombie hordes, other survivor groups, military movements. Your junk and your gossip can buy you another meal. The exchange rates are non-negotiable and are set by me because, well, I have the food and you don't. The trade post opens in 1 hour. Don't be late. I cut the feed. The trap was set. Now, to see what kind of rats would come sniffing for the cheese. An hour later, they started to trickle in. A handful of scared, skinny people, emerging from the suburban ruins like groundhogs after a long winter. They approached the concrete enclosure with the caution of a bomb squad, eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. I sat in my command chair, a fresh mug of coffee in hand, watching it all on a dozen different camera angles. I'd set up a simple transaction window, a thick, bulletproof plexiglass partition. I'd salvaged and installed myself in a side door that led into the enclosure, complete with a two-way speaker and a sliding tray. I was a post-apocalyptic bank teller. The first guy tried to trade a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey for a can of chili. I gave him a bag of chips. He looked like he was about to cry with gratitude. Pathetic. Then, I saw them. Leading the pack, looking like a deflated parade float, was Brenda the Barbarian herself. Flanking her were a few of her former sycophants. The week had not been kind to them. Their clothes were dirtier, their faces were gaunter, and the righteous indignation they wore so proudly last week had been replaced by the dull, empty look of hunger. The extra crispy setting had apparently been a very effective motivator. Brenda, the woman who had tried to get me killed so she could steal my soup, was now standing in line to beg for it. Oh, the irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. If I had any. Oh, wait, I had an entire aisle of it. Her turn came. She shuffled up to the plexiglass window, avoiding my gaze. She was carrying a dusty cardboard box. So, I said, my voice dripping with mock cheerfulness through the speaker. Look what the acid rain dragged in. What can I get for you today, madam? She flinched. Good. We need food, she mumbled, her voice raspy. She pushed the box onto the tray. I have things. I slid the tray back. Inside was a collection of the saddest suburban treasures I'd ever seen. A set of sterling silver forks, a porcelain doll with one creepy, unblinking eye, and a half-dozen romance novels. The relics of a dead world. I let out a sigh of pure, theatrical disappointment. Brenda, I said scrap metal and electronics, not the contents of your grandma's attic. This is a trading post, not Antiques Roadshow. Her face flushed with shame and anger. It's all we have. This silver is valuable. Was valuable, I corrected her gently. In the before times, now, I can't eat a fork. Its scrap value is minimal. But, since I'm a man of the community, I let the word hang in the air, a beautiful, poisonous little dart. I'll make you a one-time offer. For this entire box of priceless heirlooms. I reached under my counter, pulled out a single, standard-issue can of baked beans, and placed it on the tray. This, the look on her face, was a masterpiece. A symphony of rage, helplessness, and dawning horror. She, Brenda, the neighborhood queen, was being offered a can of beans for her precious family silver. Her cronies behind her gasped. They knew what this was. This wasn't a trade. This was a statement. This was subjugation. Internal monologue. Eat it, you sanctimonious witch. Choke on the knowledge that you are utterly at my mercy. Every bite of those beans will taste like your own failure. She stared at the can for a long, agonizing moment. Her stomach must have been staging a full-scale rebellion against her pride. In the end, biology won. With a trembling hand, she snatched the can of beans, shoved her now empty box off the tray, and scurried away without another word, her followers trailing behind like defeated dogs. Victory had never tasted so sweet. The rest of the day was a blur of similar, deeply satisfying transactions. I traded loaves of bread for dead car batteries, bottles of water for old laptops, and jars of peanut butter for bags of rusty pipes. I was stripping the entire neighborhood of any potentially useful material, and they were thanking me for it. I was converting their useless junk into my SP. Each trade, no matter how small, gave me a point or two. By the end of the day, I'd amassed another 180 SP, total 330. I closed up shop as the sun began to set. My little experiment was a roaring success. I was richer, the town was poorer, and my power was now undisputed. I saw the Jackal's van drive off. They'd seen enough. They knew they couldn't just bum rush the place now. I wasn't a target anymore. I was a geopolitical force. With my new pile of points, I went shopping on the system again. Backquote. Base upgrades to utilities. Backquote. Backquote. Water purification and reclamation system. LVL2. Backquote. Backquote. Description. Upgrades an existing water source to a closed-loop, military-grade filtration system. Recycles 99% of all wastewater. Nullifies environmental contaminants, including acid rain and biological agents. Backquote. Backquote. Cost. 300 SP. Backquote. Sold. Access to infinite, perfectly clean water in a world where every puddle could melt your skin off? That wasn't an upgrade. That was God mode. Backquote. Upgrade complete. Your water is now cleaner than a nun's conscience. Backquote. The system's sense of humor was growing on me. Just as I was about to shut down the cameras for the night, I saw one last person approach the now closed trade zone. It was a girl, maybe early 20s. She was skinny, wearing a hoodie that was too big for her, and clutching a backpack to her chest like a life raft. She looked exhausted and scared, like everyone else. But there was something different in the way she stood, in the set of her jaw. There was no whining entitlement, no sullen resentment, just a quiet, desperate resolve. She walked right up to the plexiglass window, even though the closed sign was lit, and just stood there, waiting. Curiosity got the better of me. I keyed the speaker. "We're closed." She jumped, startled, but didn't run. "Please," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I don't need much food. I need medicine. Antibiotics. I have things to trade." "Good things. I'm not a pharmacy kid. Come back tomorrow." "He might not have until tomorrow," she shot back, a flicker of fire in her eyes. "Please, just look." She unzipped her backpack and carefully pulled out, not junk, but pristine-looking components. A high-end CPU, still in its plastic case, several sticks of RAM, and what looked like a motherboard from a server. This wasn't scrap. This was gold. My internal calculator started running. This girl knew what was valuable, not in the old world, but in the new one. She knew I'd want technology. She was smart. "What's your name?" I asked, my tone shifting from dismissive to intrigued. "Chloe," she replied. "Chloe Chen." I looked at the high-tech components on my screen, then at the girl's face. She was pale and thin, but her eyes were sharp, analytical. She wasn't just a scavenger. She was something more. Internal monologue. A girl who knows the value of a server-grade motherboard in the middle of the apocalypse isn't just looking for medicine. She's trying to build something. Or fix something. This one was different. This was an asset. End of day 7. The lights of the Ryder trade post were off, but my surveillance systems were very much on. In the deep blue glow of my monitors, the girl, Chloe Chen, was a solitary figure, a ghost haunting the gates of paradise. My curiosity was a physical itch. A girl with server-grade components in the apocalypse is like finding a unicorn that knows how to code. You don't just let that walk away. But before I could play the benevolent God King, the world reminded me why my fortress had walls. 3 figures detached themselves from the shadows of a ruined strip mall across the street. They moved with the lazy, swaggering confidence of hyenas that have smelled a wounded gazelle. No desperation like Brenda's clown show. This was predatory. They entered the now unregulated space of the parking lot, fanning out to corner Chloe against my trade window. The lead troglodyte was a big dude, built like a vending machine with a patchy beard. His 2 cronies were skinny, twitchy, and looked like they shared a single brain cell between them. Well, what have we got here?" Vending machine grunted, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "Little girl, all alone after dark. What you got in the bag?" Chloe clutched her backpack tighter, her face a mask of stone-cold fear. "It's nothing, just some junk." Internal monologue. "Wrong answer, kid. In this world, nothing is the only thing people will kill you for." "Don't lie to me," he sneered, stepping closer. "We saw you, trying to trade with the man in the box. Must be good stuff." He lunged, grabbing for the backpack. I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow sip of my perfectly chilled soda. This was a teachable moment. For them, for her, and for anyone else watching. It was time to establish the terms of service for RiderSmart 2.0. I toggled the external broadcast system. My voice, calm, cold, and amplified to an unearthly volume, boomed across the parking lot, seeming to come from the sky itself. "Attention shoppers," I announced, my tone that of a bored airline pilot. "This is a friendly reminder from RiderSmart management. The safe trade zone and its immediate vicinity is a zero-tolerance area for violence, harassment, and general douchebaggery. All assets are considered property of the individuals until a trade is complete. Violators will have their shopping privileges permanently revoked." The 3 morons froze, looking around like confused cattle. Vending machines squinted at the dark storefront. "Who the hell was that?" one of the twigs whispered. "Who cares? It's just a recording." Vending machine scoffed, emboldened by his own stupidity. He turned back to Chloe, a nasty grin spreading across his face. "Now, about that bag." Internal monologue. "Oh, you sweet summer child. You absolute potato. You just had to push the big red button, didn't you?" With a thought, I accessed the system menu. I'd held some points back from the water purifier upgrade for a rainy day. And folks, it was starting to pour stupid outside. Backquote. "Territorial control and logistics to safe zone defenses." Backquote. Backquote. Non-lethal deterrent, mechanical retrieval arm, LVL1. Backquote. Backquote. Description: a concealed high-torque robotic arm for asset removal. Range: 15 feet. Max lift: 300 pounds. Backquote. Backquote. Deploy. Y1. Backquote. I mashed the mental Y key. On the wall of the supermarket, about 10 feet up, a section of the concrete facade slid open with a whisper quiet, SHHHK. A sleek multi-jointed metallic arm, looking like something straight out of a sci-fi factory, unfolded itself. It was silent, black, and utterly alien in the ruined landscape. Vending machine and his crew were so focused on Chloe they didn't even notice. He reached for her bag again. Backquote. System command, target identified threat. Action. Remove. Backquote. The arm blurred. It shot out with the speed of a striking snake, its three-fingered claw clamping around the thug's torso, pinning his arms to his sides. He let out a surprised grunt, his feet lifting off the ground. What the? His two buddies stared, jaws unhinged, their single brain cell crashing and rebooting with a blue screen of death. Chloe herself stumbled back, her eyes wide with disbelief. The arm didn't hesitate. It smoothly retracted, lifting the flailing sack of idiocy 10 feet into the air. Then, with the fluid, powerful motion of a professional baseball pitcher, it swung him around and just yeeted him. The guy flew in a perfect arc over the concrete barriers, sailed across the street, and landed with a meaty thump in a pile of trash bags right next to a pair of wandering walkers. The zombies, whose attention had been on a particularly interesting-looking hubcap, turned their heads in unison. Their dead eyes lit up. It was like Uber Eats had just delivered. The sound the thug made as he scrambled to his feet, only to have a walker sink its teeth into his leg, was a glorious symphony of cosmic justice. It was a noise that said, I have made a series of very poor life choices. Back in the parking lot, the two remaining goons were glitching out. They looked from the shrieking, soon-to-be undead appetizer across the street, to the sleek, silent robot arm now retracting back into the wall, to the girl they were about to rob. The math wasn't mathing for them anymore. They turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness faster than my respect for Brenda. Silence returned. All that was left was the distant sound of wet chewing, and the quiet, ragged breathing of Chloe Chen. I activated the speaker at the trade window again. The position for local idiot has just opened up. Any other applicants? No one answered. Good, I said, my voice now softer, more direct. Chloe Chen, the door to your left. I believe we have a trade to discuss. A heavy steel door I designated as a private entrance hissed open. A warm, clean light spilled out onto the dark, filthy asphalt. It was an invitation to another world. She hesitated for only a second before grabbing her backpack and scurrying inside like a mouse diving for its hole. The door hissed shut behind her, sealing off the horrors of the night. The first thing that hit her was the light. And the air. Clean, filtered, temperature-controlled air. She stood in a brightly lit stockroom, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling shelves, groaning with food. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom and grime of the collapsed world, were wide with shock. It was like stepping from a black-and-white Kansas into a full Technicolor Oz. Close your mouth. You're letting the expensive air out, I said, stepping out from behind a pallet of instant noodles. I was clean, wearing a fresh t-shirt and holding another can of soda. To her, I must have looked like a king. She just stared. You control that thing? The arm? Yeah. It's part of the new customer service initiative. We're really focusing on user experience. I took a long sip. Now, about your trade. You said you needed antibiotics. That snapped her out of it. Yes. For my brother. He has a deep gash that's infected? Badly. And you brought me computer parts, I said, gesturing for her to show me the goods. She carefully set her backpack on a clean table and unzipped it. The high-end CPU, the RAM, the motherboard. They were even better up close. This wasn't some salvaged junk from a desktop. This was pro-level gear. You're an engineer? IT tech? I asked, inspecting a stick of RAM. Both, she said, her voice still a bit shaky but gaining confidence. I was a PhD student at CU Boulder. Robotics and AI. Jackpot. I had literally found the unicorn that codes. Consider your brother saved, I said, not even bothering to haggle. A talent like this was worth more than a city's supply of penicillin. I have a full pharmacy. But the trade isn't just for the medicine. I turned and walked deeper into the store, beckoning her to follow. The trade is for a job. I led her past aisles of pristine goods, past the coolers humming with life. to a section of the back wall near the loading bay. It was just a blank concrete wall. I need things built. Defenses. Systems. Things that require a brain, not just points. This fortress is great, but it's reactive. I need it to be proactive. I pulled up the system menu in my mind. Back quote. Base upgrades to facilities. Back quote. Back quote. New structure workshop. Tier 1. Back quote. Back quote. Description. A dedicated space. 20 by 20 feet. Equipped with basic tool sets. A workbench. 3D printer. And a dedicated power supply for crafting and repairs. Back quote. Back quote. Cost 250 survival points. Back quote. Back quote. P remaining 80. Back quote. Build it, I commanded the system. In front of Chloe's disbelieving eyes, the solid concrete wall seemed to shimmer and dissolve. Space itself warped and expanded inwards. In less than 10 seconds, where a wall had been, there was now a fully formed, brilliantly lit workshop. It smelled of new metal and ozone. Tools hung neatly on a pegboard. A heavy-duty workbench stood in the center, and a sleek 3D printer hummed quietly in the corner. Chloe's jaw hit the floor. She took a tentative step inside, running a hand over the cold steel of the workbench, as if to confirm it was real. Her eyes, the eyes of a builder and a creator, lit up with a fire that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with purpose. What is this place? She whispered, her voice filled with reverence. This is your office, I said simply. I swiped a finger through the air, pulling up a schematic from the system's database and projecting it as a blue hologram over the workbench. It was a detailed, three-dimensional blueprint of an automated sentry turret. This is your first project, I explained. The system gives me the blueprints and the raw materials. I need someone who can actually assemble it, calibrate it, and make it better. The thugs you met tonight are just the beginning. Bigger, nastier crews are out there. I need guns on the walls, Chloe. A lot of them. In exchange, you and your brother get to live here. Safety, food, water, medicine, and a workshop that would make MIT jealous. So what do you say? I held out a box of military-grade amoxicillin. Chloe looked from the medicine in my hand, to the impossible workshop, to the holographic blueprint of the turret. The despair in her eyes was replaced by a fierce, burning resolve. She wasn't just a survivor begging for scraps anymore. She was an engineer being handed the keys to the kingdom. She didn't just take the box of medicine. She straightened her back, looked me square in the eye, and gave a sharp, determined nod. When do I start? Meanwhile, miles away, in a foul-smelling warehouse fortified with scrap metal and hubris, the two goons who had fled my parking lot were babbling to their boss. He was a wiry man with cruel eyes and a tattoo of a scorpion crawling up his neck, the leader of the Sandstorm gang. And then this magic metal arm, boss. It just came out of the wall and threw Ricky like a frisbee. The zombies got him. The boss took a long drag from a hand-rolled cigarette, his eyes fixed on the distant, dark silhouette of my supermarket. He wasn't scared. He was intrigued. A place with magic robot arms was a place with treasure. A magic arm, huh? He said, a slow, greedy smile spreading across his face. Sounds to me like there's a wizard in that castle. And wizards always have the best loot. End of day 8. The new workshop hummed with a quiet energy that was more alive than anything else in this dead town. It was the sound of progress. The sound of a unicorn learning to build cannons. Chloe Chen was in her element, moving between the workbench and the 3D printer, with a focused intensity that was almost scary. She hadn't slept, fueled by my infinite supply of coffee, and the kind of creative fire you only see in people who have been starved of their passion. For the last 24 hours, she'd been a blur of activity. I'd watch on the monitors from my command center, occasionally dropping off a hot meal or a fresh energy drink at her workshop door. It was like having a high-end Tamagotchi that built weapons of mass destruction. Feed it, water it, and it churns out security upgrades. Best investment ever. Internal monologue: 4 automated sentry turrets. She'd assembled 4 of them from the system blueprints and raw materials in a single day. Her hands moved with a surgeon's precision, calibrating targeting sensors, reinforcing servo motors, and even suggesting efficiency improvements to the ammo feed mechanism. The girl wasn't just following a recipe. She was Gordon Ramsay in a machine shop. My machine shop. Status report, Chloe, I said over the private comms link I'd had her install. Her voice came back, crisp and clear, devoid of the fear she'd had just a day ago. Turrets Alpha through Delta are online and integrated with the main security grid. Full 180-degree firing arc, covering the trade zone and all main approaches. They're loaded with 7.62mm rounds. I've linked the targeting system to your command interface. You point, they shoot. Excellent work, I said, leaning back in my chair. Get some rest. Your brother is stable and sleeping in the spare room. Nothing's getting through tonight. Famous last words. The universe, it seems, has a twisted sense of humor and a deep hatred for the phrase, nothing's getting through. My motion sensors pinged. Not the shambling, random signature of a walker pack. This was coordinated. On the main monitor, I pulled up the infrared view from a camera on the roof. A convoy of beat-up pickup trucks and rusted-out sedans was rolling down the main street, headlights off. They stopped a block away, and figures began to spill out. A lot of them. Internal monologue. Well, look at that. The clowns have assembled a circus. I counted at least 30 of them, maybe more. They were armed with the usual apocalyptic starter pack. Baseball bats wrapped in barbed wire, rusty pipes, a few hunting rifles, and a whole lot of misplaced confidence. Leading them was the wiry jackass with the scorpion tattoo on his neck. The two goons who had run away from my customer service arm were at his side, pointing animatedly towards my supermarket. Scorpion Neck grinned, revealing a set of teeth that had clearly lost their own war years ago. He was giving his army of morons a pep talk. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was universal. They only have one guy. There's a magic arm, but there's 30 of us. We charge, we smash, we win. Rarg! It was the dumbest tactical plan I had ever seen. It was like they decided to solve a Sudoku puzzle by headbutting it. Chloe, I said into the comms, we have company. The Sandstorm gang decided to pay us a visit. How many? Her voice was tight, but not with fear. With anticipation. About 30 potatoes with pointy sticks. They're getting ready to charge the main entrance. The turrets are ready, Alex. Just give the word. Oh, I will, I purred, dragging a selection box over the entire gang on my screen and tagging them as hostile. Little red triangles appeared above their heads. Let them get a little closer. I want them to really commit to their mistake. Scorpion Neck gave the signal, a dramatic chop of his hand. His mob of idiots let out a collective yell that was supposed to sound intimidating but mostly sounded like a bunch of dads at a soccer game. They started running towards my parking lot, a wave of filth and stupidity. They bypassed the concrete barriers, their feet pounding on the asphalt. They were in the kill zone now. 100 yards. 75 yards. A few of them with guns started taking pot shots, the bullets pinging harmlessly off the reinforced steel of my storefront. 50 yards. They were screaming, high on the thrill of the charge, probably already imagining the taste of my food and the feel of my supplies in their grubby hands. Internal monologue. They look so happy. It's almost a shame to ruin it. Almost. Chloe, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. Let's perform a vibe check. Authorization code. Yeet us, delete us. Copy that, she replied, a hint of a grin in her voice. Activating automated defense protocols. On the wall above the main entrance, 4 panels slid open with a satisfying SHHHK. The sleek, black forms of the sentry turrets emerged, their barrels tracking silently. A small red optical sensor on each one glowed to life. For a split second, the charging mob faltered. They saw the movement, they saw the machines. But their tiny brains, already committed to forward momentum, couldn't process the new information fast enough. Scorpion Neck's eyes went wide. What the? He never finished the sentence. I pressed the big, beautiful digital red button on my screen, labeled Engage. The night exploded. It wasn't the single crack of a rifle. It was a sound that ripped the air apart. A syncopated, mechanical roar as 4 miniguns spun to life and spat fire. B-R-R-R-R-R-R-T. B-R-R-R-R-R-T. B-R-R-R-R-R-R-R-R-T. B-R-R-R-R-R-R-T. A torrent of hot tungsten and righteous fury scythed through the parking lot. The front line of the Sandstorm gang didn't die. They ceased to exist. They were turned into a red mist, shredded into a cloud of pink vapor and flying rags. The wave of bodies behind them slammed into an invisible wall of lead. People were torn in half, limbs flew, and the triumphant war cry turned into a grotesque symphony of shrieking agony. The turrets didn't care. They were machines, and Chloe had calibrated them perfectly. They tracked, fired in controlled bursts, and tracked again. Every burst found a new target. The guy with the hunting rifle was stitched from groin to throat. The two goons who'd started all this were vaporized mid-stride. Scorpion Neck, with some instinctual cowardice, had dived behind a car. The turrets, unable to get a clean shot, simply redirected their fire. They chewed through the car's engine block, turning the metal into Swiss cheese. Hot oil and radiator fluid sprayed everywhere as the vehicle shuddered and died. The whole thing lasted maybe 15 seconds. Silence fell, broken only by the hum of the retracting turrets and the faint sizzling sound from the bullet-riddled car. The parking lot was a charnel house. Out of 30-plus attackers, maybe 5 had managed to scramble away, screaming in terror back into the darkness. The rest were just gone. A modern art installation titled Consequences. A notification popped up on my screen. Back quote. Threat neutralized. Back quote. Back quote. Hostile faction sandstorm gang. Minor. Decimated. Back quote. Back quote. Survival points awarded +15 OSP. Back quote. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Not of relief, but of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. This was better than steak. This was power. Damage report, I said, my voice a little hoarse. Minor cosmetic damage to the south wall from stray rifle fire. Already patched by the system, Chloe reported. Turrets are at 98% ammo capacity. Minimal heat stress. They performed above expectations. You performed above expectations, Chloe. Take the rest of the night off. That's an order. I leaned back, looking at my new bounty of survival points. 150, plus the 80 I had before. Total, 230. It was time to go shopping. I pulled up the main base upgrades menu. The workshop was a game changer, but it was just the start. Time to professionalize this operation. Back quote. Base upgrades to facilities. Back quote. Back quote. New structure. Armory. Tier 1. Back quote. Back quote. Description. A reinforced climate-controlled room, 20 by 20 feet, for secure weapon storage. Includes racks, cleaning kits, and a basic ammo reloading bench. Back quote. Back quote. Cost, 100 survival points. Back quote. Back quote. Build, YN back quote. Back quote. Back quote. New structure, pharmacy. Tier 1, back quote. Back quote. Description, a sterile climate-controlled room, 15 by 15 feet, with medical shelving, a diagnostic bed, and basic surgical tools. Auto stocks with common antibiotics, painkillers, and first aid supplies. Back quote. Back quote. Cost 100 survival points. Back quote. Back quote. Build, YN back quote. Back quote. Back quote. Back quote. P remaining, 30. Back quote. In the back of the supermarket, 2 more sections of blank wall shimmered and dissolved. The space behind them warped, expanding into 2 new, perfectly formed rooms. One smelled of gun oil and steel. The other smelled of antiseptic and hope. This place was no longer just a fortified grocery store. It was becoming a self-contained civilization. The attack, as monumentally stupid as it was, had been a gift. It proved the concept, eliminated a local threat, and paid for my next 2 major upgrades. It also sent a message to anyone else watching from the shadows. The Rider's Mart isn't a prize to be taken. It's a meat grinder. Stay off the lawn. My thoughts were interrupted by Chloe's voice on the comms again, this time hesitant. Alex, you need to see this. I switched my view to one of the exterior cameras near the carnage. My automated systems were already deploying small, wheeled sanitation drones to start the cleanup process, a feature I was very glad I'd unlocked. But the camera wasn't focused on the drones. It had zoomed in on a pile of wreckage near the edge of the parking lot. Huddled there was a woman. She was bleeding from a shrapnel wound in her arm, her face pale with pain and shock. But she wasn't screaming or crying. She was tearing strips from her own shirt to create a makeshift bandage. Not for herself, but for another person lying on the ground next to her. Someone who looked like a civilian caught in the crossfire. Her hands were steady, her movements efficient and practiced, even as she bled. I zoomed in further, using the system's facial recognition. No match in any criminal database. She was just someone. Someone who, in the middle of hell, was trying to save a life. Internal monologue. An armory needs a quartermaster. A workshop needs an engineer. And a pharmacy needs a doctor. Chloe, I said, my voice sharp and decisive. Get the medical retrieval drone ready. Target the woman in the blue jacket, the one playing doctor. You're bringing her in? I'm not just bringing her in, I said, watching her skillfully apply a pressure bandage to the other survivor's wound. I'm giving her a job interview. Day 9 of this dumpster fire of a world. The smell of bleach and ozone from the sanitation drones was finally overpowering the coppery tang of blood in the parking lot. Good. I hate a messy lawn. I was still in my command chair, a throne of faux leather and ergonomic support, watching the new recruit on my main monitor. The camera zoomed in, its resolution crisp enough to see the sweat beading on her forehead. The woman, the doctor, had managed to get the other survivor stabilized, a piece of shrapnel neatly removed from his leg, using what looked like a pair of sterilized tweezers from a first aid kit. Her hands didn't shake. Not once. In the middle of a literal abattoir, surrounded by the chunky salsa that used to be the Sandstorm Gang, she was a rock of clinical calm. Internal monologue. That's not just training. That's temperament. The kind you can't buy or teach. The kind that sees a multi-car pileup and immediately starts triaging instead of filming it for TikTok. Gold. Pure, unadulterated gold. Chloe, roll out the welcome wagon, I said into the comms. Just the one. The medical retrieval drone. The gurney bot? You got it, her voice chirped back, targeting the female, blue jacket. And Chloe, I added. Open side entrance C-3. Just C-3. I want a nice clean entry point. No need for her to see the landscaping out front just yet. A narrow metal door, one-eyed reinforced to be indistinguishable from the wall, slid open with a whisper-quiet hiss on the far side of the building, away from the main carnage. A small, wheeled platform, essentially a self-propelled gurney, trundled out and made its way across the asphalt towards her. The woman, Sarah, flinched when she saw it, scrambling for a piece of rebar she could use as a weapon. Her eyes, sharp and alert, tracked the machine's harmless approach. She was probably expecting it to sprout gun barrels. Most people would. This is the operator of the RiderSmart facility. My pre-recorded voice echoed from a small speaker on the drone. The tone was intentionally flat, corporate, and disarming. You have been identified as a non-hostile. That gurney is for the injured man. We can provide advanced medical care. Please place him on the platform. You may accompany it inside. She hesitated, her eyes scanning the dark windows of my supermarket. She was looking for the trick. The trap. In this world, an outstretched hand was usually bait. Internal monologue. Come on, Doc. I know what you're thinking. Is this how I get my organs harvested? Fair question. But look at your patient. He's gonna die of sepsis in 12 hours, without real antibiotics. Your choice. A possible organ harvesting supervillain with clean facilities, or certain death in a ditch. The odds are clearly in my favor. Her gaze fell to the man on the ground, whose breathing was becoming ragged. The professional in her won out over the survivor. With a grunt of effort, she hoisted him onto the gurney. The drone's sensors detected the weight, and it smoothly turned and headed back towards the open door. She followed, walking a few feet behind it, rebar still held tight in her hand like a scepter. The second she crossed the threshold, the metal door slid shut behind her, plunging the corridor into the bright, sterile LED light of my domain. She blinked, disoriented by the sudden shift from post-apocalyptic gloom to hospital-grade lighting. The air here didn't smell like death and decay. It smelled of clean linen and antiseptic. I watched on the camera as she followed the drone down a short hallway. Chloe, wearing a fresh set of scrubs I'd provided, met them at the end. Right this way, Chloe said, her voice calm and professional. She gestured towards an open doorway. We'll get him stabilized. Sarah stood frozen at the entrance to the new pharmacy. Her jaw went slack. The piece of rebar slipped from her fingers and clattered to the polished concrete floor. It wasn't a room. It was a goddamn miracle. Gleaming stainless steel counters. A fully articulated diagnostic bed with integrated monitors that were currently showing the patient's vitals. Glass-fronted cabinets stocked floor to ceiling with meticulously organized pharmaceuticals. Boxes of amoxicillin, ciprofloxacin, morphine drips, bags of saline and IV fluids, suture kits, surgical trays, bandages of every conceivable size. It was a scene straight out of a primetime medical drama, not the 9th day of the zombie apocalypse. Out in the world, a single bottle of aspirin was worth a gun. In here, I had enough painkillers to make a herd of elephants forget their own names. What is this place? She whispered, her voice filled with a kind of religious awe. Time for my entrance. I walked in from a connecting hallway, holding a tablet that displayed the patient's vitals. I didn't even look at her at first. Patient has a depressed fracture and a high probability of infection from the projectile. Let's start him on a broad-spectrum antibiotic drip and get him prepped for surgery, I said to Chloe, my tone all business. Then, I turned my attention to the stunned woman. You're Dr. Sarah Vance. Graduated top 10% from Johns Hopkins Medical. Ran the ER over at County General like it was your personal fiefdom. Best damn ER doc in this town. Her eyes widened. How do you know that? I own the building, I said with a shrug, as if that explained everything. Which, in a way, it did. Chloe, if you would. Chloe, who had spent the last hour devouring a first aid manual the system provided, moved with surprising confidence. She cleaned Sarah's arm wound, applied a disinfectant that probably didn't exist outside of a military lab, and began stitching it with a practiced neatness that was a testament to her steady hands as an engineer. I gestured around the room. Out there, a cut like the one on your arm gets infected. You get a fever, you get weak, and then you die. Or you turn. A man like him, I nodded to the unconscious survivor. He'd be dead by morning. Here. He'll be complaining about the food in a week. You'll be back on your feet in an hour. Why? She asked, finally finding her voice. Why do all this? Internal monologue. Ah, the question of the noble hero. She thinks I'm running a charity. Cute. Because I'm a pragmatist, Dr. Vance, I said, leaning against a counter full of enough antibiotics to cure a small nation. I have a fortress. I have unlimited food, water, and power. But you can't eat a steak if you've got appendicitis. A base, no matter how strong, is only as good as the health of its people. I had a hardware problem. Chloe here is my engineer. I nodded to Chloe, who gave a small, focused smile without looking up from her stitching. Now I have a software problem. The wetware, specifically. This facility is state-of-the-art. It can analyze blood, diagnose illnesses, and even 3D print simple surgical tools. But it needs a user. It needs an expert. I locked eyes with her. The pitch was simple. It wasn't about money or power. It was about something far more valuable to a person like her. This isn't a prison doctor. It's a job offer. I'm offering you this entire facility, unlimited supplies, a safe place to live, work, and do what you were born to do. The salary is, you get to save lives instead of watching people die from infected scratches. The only condition is that I, and the people I designate, are your priority patients. I let the offer hang in the air. It wasn't a threat. It was a checkmate. I was weaponizing her own Hippocratic oath against the sheer hopelessness of the world outside. For a doctor who had probably spent the last week trying to set broken bones with sticks and disinfect wounds with vodka, this place wasn't a clinic. It was heaven. Her expression shifted from suspicion to disbelief, and finally, to a desperate, burning hope. It was the look of a starving person being shown an all-you-can-eat buffet. You're serious, she breathed. I just spent $100,000 worth of ammunition to turn 30 idiots into lawn fertilizer, I said flatly. I don't joke about my investments. Chloe finished the last stitch and snipped the thread. All done. It'll barely leave a scar. Sarah looked from her neatly bandaged arm to the pristine room, then to me. The fight went out of her, replaced by a resolve I knew I could count on. Okay, she said, her voice firm. Let's get to work. What's his blood type? Internal monologue and hired. Welcome to the team, Dr. Vance. While she and Chloe got to work on the survivor, a random accountant named Bill, who was about to become the luckiest man on Earth, I returned to my command center. A news feed I'd set up to scrape any remaining broadcast signals pinged with an alert. It was a looping emergency broadcast from a holdout station in Denver. Repeat, this is a public health emergency. Widespread outbreaks of dysentery and suspected cholera are being reported across the metro area. Due to the collapse of sanitation infrastructure and contaminated water sources, boil all water. Avoid contact with the sick. I smirked. Right on schedule. The zombies were just the opening act. The real killers in any societal collapse were always the old classics, disease and starvation. While the rest of the world was about to be reintroduced to medieval plagues, I had my own private CDC, run by a top-tier doctor, with a magical supply of medicine. The playing field wasn't just uneven. I had tilted it, paved it, and built a stadium on it. With defense handled by my turrets, engineering handled by Chloe, and now medicine handled by Sarah, the foundational pillars of my empire were in place. The fortress was secure. The population, all three of us, was healthy. Now, it was time to move on to the next item on the agenda, the most important one. I pulled up a map on the main screen. It showed the layout of the city, 60 miles north. I zoomed in on the sprawling campus of Colorado State University. My finger traced a path to a specific cluster of buildings. The dormitory complex. My sister, Maya, trapped in there. I hadn't been able to get a signal through to her since the second day. But now, I wasn't just one guy in a supermarket. I was the lord of a fortress. I had an engineer who could modify vehicles and a doctor who could patch up any injuries. I had a portable arsenal in my personal storage space. The time for hunkering down was over. It was time for an away mission. Chloe, I said into the comms. Cancel your nap. I need you in the workshop. We're gonna build a war rig. A what? You heard me, I said, a cold grin spreading across my face as I plotted a route on the map, highlighting choke points and potential ambush sites. It's time to bring my sister home. Day 10. The world was officially a dumpster fire, but inside my fortress the air smelled like coffee and progress. My war rig comment hadn't been a joke. In this new world, if you weren't ridiculously overprepared, you were just a loot drop waiting to happen. I was in the warehouse section of my mart, which now looked less like a Costco stockroom, and more like a high-tech custom auto shop from a reality TV show. In the center of the room, raised on hydraulic lifts I'd materialized using the system, was a beat-up but solid-boned box truck. One of the old delivery vehicles for Riders Mart. Its logo, a cheerful cartoon apple, was about to be covered by several inches of hardened steel. Okay, lay it on me, I said, sipping a freshly brewed espresso. The system's appliance aisle was a gift from God. Chloe, my newly appointed head of everything that goes vroom or bang, swiped a greasy hand across her forehead, leaving a smudge. She was holding a tablet displaying a 3D model that looked absolutely terrifying. So I took your Mad Max on a budget idea and, upgraded it a little, she said, her eyes gleaming with the kind of manic energy only a true gearhead could possess. The chassis is solid. I've used the system's fabricator to 3D print composite armor plating. It's lighter than steel, but just as tough. We'll layer it over the entire cabin and cargo bay. The windows are getting replaced with 2-inch polycarbonate. You could shoot it with a 50 cal, and it would probably just complain. Internal monologue. This woman is a treasure. I rescued an engineer and ended up with a real-life Q from James Bond, only with more enthusiasm and fewer cryptic remarks. Tires? I asked. The number one reason road trips fail in the apocalypse, right after quote, being eaten. Run flats are for amateurs, she scoffed, zooming in on the wheels of the 3D model. These are solid polyurethane. No air, no punctures. The ride will be a bit bumpy, but you won't get stranded. I've also reinforced the suspension to handle the extra weight and added a V-plow to the front. We're not driving around zombies. We're driving through them. They're speed bumps now. The piece de resistance was the rooftop. A remote-controlled turret, complete with a .30 caliber machine gun fed directly from an ammo box inside the truck. It was hooked up to a targeting system I could operate from the driver's seat. I call it the unsubscriber, Chloe said with a proud grin, because anyone who messes with it is getting permanently removed from the premises. Chloe, you are a violent, brilliant poet, I said, deeply impressed. How long? With the system's fabricator running non-stop, and me pulling an all-nighter fueled by your magical coffee machine? We'll have it rolling by morning. While she worked her magic, turning a delivery truck into a mobile death machine, I had Sarah, my new doctor, handle the medical side of the equation. I gave her a large military-grade duffel bag and told her to fill it with everything she might need for a field expedition. She took to the task with the solemn focus of a high priestess, preparing a sacred ritual. The sheer abundance of the pharmacy seemed to have short-circuited the part of her brain that understood scarcity. I watched her via a security camera. She was methodically packing trauma kits, combat tourniquets, hemostatic agents, broad-spectrum antibiotics, morphine auto-injectors, IV bags, suture kits, and a portable defibrillator. It was a go bag that could support a small platoon through a war zone. Internal monologue. Out there, some poor fool is probably trying to trade his wedding ring for a rusty bottle of Tylenol. Meanwhile, I'm packing enough medical gear to perform open-heart surgery on the side of the road. The disparity is just delicious. To underscore the point, I switched the main monitor in my command center to an external camera overlooking the main road. A sorry-looking group of 5 survivors was trying to push-start a beat-up minivan. They were rail-thin, dressed in rags and casting terrified glances at every shadow. Their vehicle was a rolling coffin, an advertisement for free food and supplies inside. They were prey, and they knew it. I took a long, slow sip of my perfectly temperate water. The contrast was so sharp it was almost comical. They were playing survival horror on nightmare difficulty. I was playing a city builder sim with cheat codes enabled. But leaving the base, even in a custom-built murder truck, was a risk. I wasn't an idiot. My fortress was my lifeline. Before I took one step outside, I had to make sure it was even more secure than when I was in it. System, I said aloud. Show me available defense upgrades. A holographic menu shimmered to life in front of me. Backquote. Available upgrades. Backquote. Backquote. High voltage electric fencing, perimeter, 1500 survival points. Backquote. Backquote. Automated turret system, level 2 armor piercing rounds, 2,000 survival points, backquote. Backquote. AI, Hostile Identification System, Level 1, 1,000 survival points, backquote. Backquote. Sub-Level 1, Expansion, Bunker, 5,000 survival points, backquote. I'd racked up a good stash of points from wiping out the Sandstorm gang. It was time to spend them. Purchase and install high-voltage electric fencing and the AI Hostile Identification System, I commanded. Backquote. Confirmed. 2,500 survival points deducted. Commencing instant installation. Backquote. Outside, silent drones I'd never even seen before materialized from thin air. They moved with silent, impossible speed, installing thick pylons around the entire perimeter of the Riders Mart property line. Cables were strung between them, and a faint, almost invisible hum filled the air. On my screen, a new status icon appeared. Backquote. Perimeter defense. Lethal. Active. Backquote. The AI system was a software update. My camera feeds now had green boxes around Chloe and Sarah, labeling them backquote. Backquote. A stray cat that had wandered into the parking lot was boxed in blue. Backquote. Neutral_organic. Backquote. Anything else, zombie or human, would be tagged with a big screaming red box. Backquote. Hostile. Backquote. Combine that with the turrets, and my base was now an automated killing field. No one was getting in unless I wanted them to. The final step was the most crucial. I walked over to Chloe in the garage. She was welding a final plate onto the truck's prow, sparks flying everywhere. I'm transferring temporary command authority to you, I said over the noise. She shut off the torch and lifted her safety mask. Wait, for real? You trust me with all this? I trust your brain, I corrected her. You understand this place. You know how it works. Sarah will handle the people, you handle the hardware. I've set the defensive posture to scorched earth. The turrets will fire on any hostile that crosses the outer perimeter. The fence will fry anything that touches it. Your only job is to stay inside, stay safe, and keep things running. Don't open the door for anyone. I don't care if it's the Pope riding a unicorn. You keep it sealed. She nodded, the weight of the responsibility settling on her. Got it. No popes. What about you? The city is 60 miles away. The highways are clogged. Who said I'm taking the highway? I smirked, pulling up the route I had planned on my tablet. The map was a mess of red icons. The system had been scraping satellite data and drone reconnaissance. The highways were parking lots of dead cars and milling herds. But there were other routes. Service roads, old freight rail lines, even cross-country paths. The unsubscriber wasn't built for smooth asphalt. It was built for a world without roads. The map also showed new, disturbing icons. A skull with a splash mark next to it indicated a confirmed backquote, spitter backquote sighting. These things could hawk corrosive acid from 50 yards away, turning cover into a death trap. Worse were the big, bold icons, shaped like a hulking beast, backquote, brute, backquote. These were walking tanks, monstrosities of muscle and bone that could flip a car like a toy. They were the reason for the V-plow and the composite armor. This trip wasn't a joyride. It was a calculated intrusion into a live fire zone. But my sister was in there. For her, I'd drive through hell itself. By dawn, it was ready. The cartoon Apple logo was gone. In its place was a menacing slate-gray beast of a truck. It sat low on its massive, solid tires, the angled plow giving it the look of a hungry predator. It was ugly, functional, and the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I loaded my personal arsenal into a locked weapons cabinet bolted to the interior wall. An assault rifle, a combat shotgun, my favorite pistols, and enough ammo to start a small war. Sarah handed me the medical duffel bag, which I secured on the passenger seat. Stay safe, she said, her expression serious. For the first time, she looked less like an employee and more like a concerned colleague. That's the plan, I replied. You too, lock this place down tight. I'll radio in every 12 hours. If you don't hear from me in 48, assume the worst and hold the fort. Chloe gave me a thumbs up from the main control panel she'd set up in the warehouse. Don't worry, boss, I'll keep your stuff safe. Try not to scratch the paint on the new toy. I climbed into the driver's seat. The cabin was a cocoon of technology. The original dashboard was still there, but now it was surrounded by monitors displaying camera feeds from every angle, the turret targeting system, and my GPS route. It felt like the cockpit of a mech. I turned the key. The engine, a diesel powerhouse that Chloe had tuned to perfection, roared to life with a deep, guttural rumble that vibrated through my bones. Chloe, open the main bay door, I said into the comms. With a low groan of massive gears, the huge roll-up door to the warehouse began to ascend. Gray morning light spilled in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It revealed the world outside, silent, still, and dead. A single walker was shambling aimlessly across the far end of the parking lot, oblivious. I gripped the steering wheel. This was it. The first time I was voluntarily leaving my sanctuary since my rebirth. I wasn't the scared, naive Alex who died in a back alley anymore. I was the owner of the apocalypse, and I was going to pick up my sister. I put the unsubscriber in gear, and the behemoth lurched forward, rolling out of the darkness of the warehouse and into the dawn of the 10th day. The real game was about to begin. Day 10, Hour 1 post-departure. The unsubscriber, or the bulldog, as I'd started calling it in my head, crunched over the lone walker in the parking lot with a sound like stepping on a bag of wet celery. The sensation, transmitted through the solid polyurethane tires and reinforced suspension, was barely a bump. On one of my dash-mounted monitors, a small, satisfying notification popped up. Backquote, +1 survival point backquote. Internal monologue, well, that's a start. At this rate, I'll be able to afford a new air freshener by the time I get back. I swung the behemoth onto the main road leading out of town. The world beyond my reinforced polycarbonate windows was a silent movie of decay. Overturned cars, abandoned houses with their doors hanging open like slack jaws, and the occasional shambling figure wandering aimlessly. It was the classic apocalypse starter pack. For everyone else, it was a nightmare. For me, it was a scenic drive. The highway was worse. Not just bad traffic worse, but a genuine, multi-lane parking lot stretching to the horizon. Cars, trucks, and RVs were tangled together in a final, desperate traffic jam that had ended in bloodshed and reanimation. Hundreds of walkers milled about, trapped between the vehicles. A festering, groaning river of death. Who said I'm taking the highway? I mumbled to myself, a smirk playing on my lips. Chloe's genius wasn't just in the armor and guns, but in the all-terrain capability. I veered off the asphalt, the bulldog's V-plow effortlessly tearing through a flimsy guardrail. We descended a grassy embankment and landed with a solid thud onto the wide, flat service path running alongside an old freight rail line. This was the real VIP lane. As I cruised along the path, I passed a small group of survivors, huddled behind a dead pickup truck on the highway above. There were 4 of them, armed with a pathetic collection of tire irons and kitchen knives, trying to fight off just three, measly walkers. They moved with a desperate, clumsy terror, swinging wildly. One of them, a guy in a torn flannel shirt, saw my truck. His jaw went slack, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and raw, undiluted envy. He probably thought he was hallucinating. I gave him a little 2-finger wave from behind my bulletproof window, a king acknowledging his peasantry. Internal monologue. Look at them, playing on hardcore mode with starter gear. Meanwhile, I'm in a pay-to-win vehicle. Life's not fair, is it, Flannel Man? Maybe you should have planned better. A notification pinged on my screen. Backquote. Hemiso. Emanane alert. Menisco or Zarifater. Meniso. House to tease around my score. Urisi Green, Januta Keep. Ranged. Detected. 50 yards. Vector, 11 o'clock. Backquote. My eyes flicked to the left. Perched on top of an overturned tanker truck was a grotesque figure. Its throat was puffed out like a bullfrog's, pulsating with a sickly green glow. A spitter. The thing that could melt steel with its toxic loogies. In my past life, a creature like this would have sent a whole camp into a panic. It saw me. Its chest convulsed, and a thick, steaming glob of acid shot through the air. It was a perfect shot, heading straight for my driver's side window. I didn't even flinch. I just took a slow sip from a can of cold Coke I'd grabbed from the cab's mini fridge. Esplat. The acid hit the window with a sizzle. It smoked and bubbled for about 3 seconds, leaving a greasy, greenish smudge, and that was it. The 2-inch polycarbonate didn't even get cloudy. Chloe had said it would probably just complain. She was right. Performance review. Excellent, I said to the empty cab. I engaged the turret control, a joystick and targeting screen to my right. A green reticle appeared on the monitor, locking onto the spitter. Time to unsubscribe. I pressed the firing stud. The .30 caliber machine gun on the roof erupted with a deafening, beautiful roar. B-R-R-R-R-R-T. A stream of tracer rounds stitched across the distance and tore the spitter into green and red confetti. Backquote. +50 survival points. Special zombie eliminated. Backquote. 50 points for a mini-boss? Not bad. This is more profitable than running a convenience store. I kept driving, the bulldog eating up the miles. The rail line was a straight shot, a perfect path through the chaos. Every few minutes, a zombie would shamble onto the tracks, drawn by the engine's rumble. They were less than speed bumps. The V-plow, which I'd mentally christened the eviction notice, sent them flying in pieces without me ever having to slow down. The point notifications became a steady, pleasant rhythm. Plus one, plus one, plus one, plus one. It was like collecting gold coins in Mario Kart. Then the ground shook. Up ahead, something massive stepped out from behind a collapsed railway bridge. It was huge, at least 9 feet tall, with one arm grotesquely swollen into a club of hardened bone and muscle. A brute. The walking tank. It let out a roar that wasn't a sound of hunger, but a bellow of pure, territorial aggression. It pounded its chest and then slammed its giant arm into the ground, cracking the concrete ties like pretzels. Backquote. Hostile_elite detected. High impact threat. Immediate vicinity. Backquote. Internal monologue. Oh good, the final boss of this tutorial level. Let's see what the big guy's got. The brute lowered its head and charged. It was surprisingly fast for something so big, its footsteps thundering against the earth. It was aiming to clothesline the truck, to flip it like a child's toy. A normal vehicle would have been turned into scrap metal. But Chloe didn't build a normal vehicle. Targeting system, lock on legs, I commanded calmly. The turret swiveled, the reticle dropping from the brute's massive head to its thick tree-trunk-like knees. A human shooter might aim for the head. An AI, free from panic, goes for the most logical weak point. BRRRRRT. The machine gun chattered again. The armor-piercing rounds Chloe had insisted on were worth every point. They chewed through the brute's dense flesh and shattered its right kneecap. The monster howled, a sound of fury and pain, and stumbled, its charge turning into a graceless fall. It was still a 9-foot-tall, 1-ton problem, and it was falling right in my path. I didn't swerve, I didn't brake, I pushed the accelerator to the floor. The bulldog's diesel engine screamed as I rammed the crippled brute head-on. The impact was immense, a deep, sickening crunch that vibrated through the entire chassis. The V-plow did its job perfectly, lifting the massive body up and tossing it aside like a bag of garbage. The truck barely shuddered. On my forward-facing camera, I watched the brute's broken form tumble down the embankment and lie still. Backquote. 300 survival points. Elite zombie eliminated. Backquote. Backquote. System commendation, dominant force demonstrated. Bonus plus 100 survival points. Backquote. Now that's what I call a satisfying customer interaction. I grinned, feeling the adrenaline sing in my veins. This was better than any video game. The power was real. The rewards were tangible. A few hours and several dozen pulverized walkers later, the railway line became impassable, blocked by a train derailment that looked like a giant's discarded toy set. I was forced to navigate onto the back roads, weaving through a small, forgotten town called Oakhaven. The vibe here was different. The silence was heavier. Main Street was a junkyard of broken-down floats from some kind of town festival, now surrounded by the very dead townsfolk. It was as I was carefully maneuvering the bulldog around a giant papier-mâché corn cob that the radio crackled. It had been dead silent for the entire trip, nothing but static. But now, a voice, faint and laced with static, cut through. Repeat, this is Officer Mia Wallace, badge number 724. Is anyone on this net? We are pinned down. Trapped in the Oakhaven Sheriff Station, outnumbered, ammo is critical. Can anyone? The signal was weak, but the name hit me like a ton of bricks. Mia Wallace. Kunu Chan Sat Swat, a name from my mental checklist of high-value targets to recruit. Her file, a distant memory from news articles I'd read in my past life about a celebrated local hero, flashed in my mind. Tough. Skilled. A leader. Internal monologue. Well, well, well. Speak of the devil, and she shall appear. It seems my little road trip is about to have a recruitment side quest. I picked up the comms handset, my thumb hovering over the transmit button. Out there, in a dusty, forgotten sheriff station, was a key component of my future empire. A commander for my army, and she was about to be zombie food. Not on my watch. This is Ryder, I said into the microphone, my voice calm and steady. I read you, Officer Wallace. Tell me your exact location. I'm coming to punch your ticket out of there. On the other end, after a moment of shocked silence, her voice came back, stronger this time, laced with a desperate hope. Ryder? I don't know who the hell you are, but you're about to be my favorite person in the world. I looked at the sheriff's station location on my map, a half-mile away. Then I looked at the sea of shambling corpses between me and it. Hang tight, Wallace, I said, a predator's smile spreading across my face. The big dog is on its way. Day 12 of this global train wreck. The drive through Oakhaven was like navigating a crashed carnival. The bulldog's V-plow nonchalantly nudged a giant papier-mâché chili pepper out of the way, its smiling cartoon face cracking into a dozen pieces. Another half-mile of this nonsense, and I saw it. The Oak Haven Sheriff's Station. It looked less like a bastion of law and order, and more like the last cracker in a box full of hungry ants. The building itself was a low, brick affair, probably built in the 80s and never updated. Its windows were barricaded with whatever the poor saps inside could find. Desks, filing cabinets, what looked like a vending machine. Smart, but temporary. A tide of the dead, easily a few hundred walkers, pressed in from all sides, a moaning, clawing mass of rotting flesh. Their sheer numbers were slowly, grindingly dismantling the makeshift defenses. Every now and then, a gunshot would pop from a crack in the barricade, dropping one of the meat puppets, but it was like using a water pistol on a forest fire. And then there was the main event. In the middle of the street, systematically battering the main entrance, was a brute. This one was even chunkier than the one I turned into roadkill earlier. It was using a ripped-up lamppost like a battering ram, and with every swing, the reinforced glass doors splintered, and the metal frame groaned in protest. Sparks flew. The whole building shook. Internal monologue. Okay, so their situation has been officially downgraded from, quote, bad to, quote, completely screwed. That brute is the bouncer, and last call is in about 5 minutes. Perfect timing. I parked the bulldog a safe 100 yards away, engine humming quietly. No need to announce myself just yet. First, reconnaissance. I flicked a switch, and the main monitor zoomed in with crystal clarity, the audio sensors filtering out the groans to pick up the pops of gunfire and panicked shouts. I could see her. Mia Wallace. She was positioned at a shattered second-floor window, a police-issue rifle in her hands. She looked exactly like the hero cop from the old news articles, just with more dirt and desperation on her face. She was a pro, no doubt. Every shot was a kill. Pop. Headshot. Pop. Headshot. But her movements were clipped, efficient in a way that screamed she was counting every single bullet. Beside her, a young male deputy was frantically trying to clear a jam in his own rifle, his hands shaking. Another officer was on the ground floor, firing a pistol through a mail slot, his face pale. I toggled to thermal vision, red signatures everywhere outside. Inside, 5 faint, warm blobs. That's all that was left of the Oak Haven PD. 5 people against an army, with a mini-boss knocking at the front door. The RNG was not in their favor. Internal monologue. 5 skilled armed personnel with law enforcement and combat training. That's not a liability. That's a prepackaged security team. A starter pack for my future army. All I have to do is unbox them before the product gets damaged. The brute roared and slammed the lamppost into the doors again. A huge crack spiderwebbed across the entrance. They had maybe 2 more hits before the whole thing came down. Time to make my pitch. I picked up the handset for the external PA system. Chloe had installed a ridiculously overpowered one, the kind used for riot control or announcing specials at a monster truck rally. My thumb pressed the transmit button. My voice, amplified 1,000 times, boomed across the ruined street, cutting through the endless groaning like a thunderclap. Every walker in a 2-block radius stopped and turned their stupid heads toward the bulldog. Attention, occupants of the Oak Haven Sheriff's Station, I announced, my voice calm, level, and utterly out of place in this hellscape. Inside the station, I saw the figures freeze. Mia Wallace herself flinched and peered out, her eyes searching for the source of the godlike voice. My name is Ryder, I continued, letting the syllables hang in the air. I am currently sitting in the large, over-armored, and extremely well-armed truck down the street. You may have noticed it. A moment of silence. The brute, confused by the new, loud noise, actually stopped battering the door and looked around like a dumb animal. I can see that you are in a suboptimal situation, I said, the understatement of the century. I can also resolve this situation. I will eliminate every hostile between my position and yours, including the big fellow with the pole. I will punch a hole in this siege and escort you to safety. On my monitor, I saw the young deputy next to Mia shouting something at her, his face a mask of shocked hope. He was pointing frantically at my truck. She was just staring, her jaw tight. A professional assessing a new, unbelievable variable. However, I added, my tone shifting from announcer to CEO. My assistance is not free. This is not a charity. The hope on the deputy's face evaporated, replaced by confusion. Mia's expression hardened. She knew what was coming. I am offering a contract. A trade, I stated clearly. Your lives in exchange for your loyalty. You survive. And in return, you work for me. Your skills, your knowledge, your oaths. They become mine. I will be your new commander, your new sheriff, your new god, if that's what it takes. Accept, and you live. Refuse. And I will put my truck in reverse and find other talent elsewhere. You have 30 seconds to decide. Your clock started when the big guy hit the door last. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of my own words almost made me laugh. Here they were, moments from being torn limb from limb, and I was holding a job interview. It was beautiful. This was power. Not the power to kill, but the power to dictate the terms of life itself. Through my scope, I saw the debate explode inside. The young deputy was yelling, waving his arms, probably something about honor, duty, not surrendering to some random voice. Another officer on the ground floor was looking up at Mia, his face pleading. He just wanted to live. Mia Wallace didn't move. She just stared at my truck, a black, monstrous shape in the sea of gray shambling death. She was a proud woman. I could see it in the set of her shoulders. A leader who had lost control, not through her own failing, but because the world had fundamentally broken its own rules. She was a top-tier player in a game that had been patched overnight, and all her old skills were suddenly nerfed. I was the guy who'd bought the new expansion pack with all the OP gear. Internal monologue, Simon Wallace. Do the math. Your pride or your team's intestines being used as a jump rope by that thing? It's not a hard choice. This isn't a moral dilemma. It's a simple cost-benefit analysis. The brute, having figured out that my truck wasn't an immediate threat, turned its attention back to the door. It hefted the lamppost, its massive muscles bunching up. This was going to be the finishing blow. 15 seconds. My voice boomed out again, cold and impartial. The young deputy flinched. The officer at the mail slot sank to his knees. Mia finally moved. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She leaned her rifle against the wall, grabbed the department's walkie-talkie from her belt, and held it up to the window, keying the mic. Her voice, tinny and full of static, crackled through my truck's comm system. It was a general frequency, one she hoped I was monitoring. "This is Officer Wallace," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "To the individual in the truck, you have no right." "I have a V-plow and a .30 caliber turret," I replied over the loudspeaker, not even bothering with the radio. "That gives me all the rights." 10 seconds. Internal monologue, rights? Lady, the only right that matters right now is the right to not be eaten, and I'm the sole distributor of that particular permit. The brute let out a deafening roar and swung the lamppost. Crack boom! The entire entrance assembly shattered, blowing inwards in a shower of glass and twisted metal. The way was open. The groaning tide of walkers surged forward, pouring into the breach. The final defense was gone. Screams erupted from inside the station, not just from the officers, but the sound of other, civilian voices I hadn't seen. Oh, they had innocence in there. That complicated her choice. It made it simpler. "Time's up, Wallace." My amplified voice was the sound of Judgment Day. "What's it gonna be? Your pride, OR, their lives?" Through the shattered doorway, I could see the first few walkers reaching the officers. The young deputy shot one in the face, point blank, then another. But more were coming. It was over. They were about to be swamped. Then Mia's voice, raw and defeated but clear as a bell, came over the radio. She wasn't speaking to me anymore. She was giving an order to her remaining people. An order that sealed their fate and their future. "Stand down. Cease fire." Then she raised the radio again, her gaze fixed on my truck like she was staring me right in the eye. "Ryder, you win. We accept your terms." Her voice was a ragged shout, laced with the bitter taste of surrender. "Get US the hell out of here, you bastard. We accept." A slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. I toggled the turret controls online, the joystick fitting perfectly in my hand. The targeting reticle appeared on my screen, immediately painting the brute's massive head in a green box. Internal monologue, excellent. The HR department is officially open for business. Now for the onboarding process. "Terms accepted, Officer Wallace." I broadcast one last time, my voice now holding a hint of chilling enthusiasm. "Don't worry, you've made the best deal of your life. Now watch the show." Day 12 continued. The aftertaste of Mia Wallace's surrender was sweeter than the last can of Coke on Earth. It was the flavor of absolute victory, of a plan coming together so perfectly it was almost a work of art. Internal monologue, HR process initiated. Time for the live-action product demonstration. Hope they're taking notes, because there will be a test later, and the failing grade is being eaten. My thumb stroked the joystick. "Terms accepted, Officer Wallace," echoed my voice from the PA system, one last time for dramatic effect. "Don't worry, you've made the best deal of your life. Now watch the show." I didn't inch the bulldog forward. I didn't cautiously navigate the horde. I floored it. The 6-ton armored truck, a beast of Chloe's design and my funding, didn't roar. It thundered. The V-plow, designed for clearing snowdrifts, met its true calling, clearing fields of rotting meat. Bodies were thrown aside like bowling pins. the impacts barely registering as dull thuds against the layers of reinforced steel. The truck was a black spear thrusting into the heart of the gray, shambling sea of death. From their shattered windows, I could see the faces of Mia's team. They were expecting a firefight, a desperate push. Instead, they got a monster truck rally. The bulldog screeched to a halt, right in the middle of the densest part of the horde, maybe 50 yards from the station's ruined entrance. The zombies, momentarily disoriented, immediately converged on their new, much larger target, their groans coalescing into a single hungry roar. They began to claw uselessly at the high-gloss, zombie-proof paint job. "Okay, Chloe, let's see if this toy works as advertised," I muttered to myself, tapping a large, friendly red button on the console labeled Crowd Control. "System, activate the resonance field emitter." A low hum began to build, a thrumming vibration that I could feel in the base of my spine. But the sound outside was something else entirely. It wasn't a noise. It was an absence of noise. A deep, bone-jarring wub-wub-wub sound pulsed from the truck, and every walker within a 50-meter radius just stopped. It wasn't a dramatic, explosive effect. It was far more terrifying. They just froze mid-lunge, mid-groan, mid-claw. They stood there, twitching spasmodically, their jaws slack, their eyes vacant. They looked like a video game that had lagged out, a server-wide stutter. The entire siege, the wave of death that had been about to swallow the station whole, was now a grotesque, silent sculpture garden. Inside the station, the silence was clearly soul-shattering. I saw the young deputy, the one with the jammed rifle, lower his weapon. His mouth hung open, a perfect O of disbelief. Another officer, an older, grizzled man, made the sign of the cross. Mia Wallace just stared, her professional composure completely annihilated. She understood firepower, tactics, choke points. She did not understand this. This was black magic. Internal monologue. Step 1, stun the ads. Step 2, nuke the boss. Step 3, clean up the trash. It's basic raid tactics, people. Try to keep up. The only thing still moving was the brute. The stun pulse seemed to annoy it more than anything else. It shook its massive head like a dog trying to get water out of its ears and let out a roar of rage, zeroing in on the bulldog. It hefted the lamppost, ready for another go. "Big, dumb, and full of rage," I chuckled, my hand already on another control. "You're a classic, my friend, but classics get retired." I hit another switch. A small hatch on the roof of the bulldog slid open, and a sleek, cylindrical turret rose silently. It wasn't some clunky, welded-on machine gun. This was a custom-built, auto-targeting .30 caliber nightmare, courtesy of Chloe's caffeine-fueled genius and my bottomless supply of survival points. Turret AI, designated mop-up. Prioritize active hostiles, then stun targets. Headshots only. Go nuts. The turret didn't roar. It didn't chatter. It began to operate with a series of quiet, efficient thumps. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of a god-tier aimbot at work. With each sound, a frozen zombie's head would pop like a gore-filled water balloon. The turret swiveled with inhuman speed and precision. A mechanical ballet of death. It didn't waste a single bullet. It was clean. It was surgical. It was horrifyingly effective. While the turret was playing its rhythm game with the walker heads, I dealt with the main event. My left hand gripped a joystick built into my armrest, the feed from a grenade launcher's camera popping up on a secondary screen. A green targeting box immediately locked onto the brute's chest. "Special delivery for Mr. Ugly." I squeezed the trigger. With a soft thump, a single canister shot out from a port under the turret. It wasn't a standard frag. This was one of my special purchases before the world went to hell. A high-incendiary, thermobaric grenade designed for, well, it wasn't designed for anything legal, that's for sure. The canister hit the brute square in the chest with a pathetic little tink. The monster barely noticed. It was still winding up to swing its lamppost. 1 second later, the world turned white. There was no big Hollywood boom. Just a blinding flash and an implosive whoomph that sucked the air out of the street. The brute didn't get blown apart. It was erased. One moment, it was a 12-foot-tall mountain of muscle and rage. The next, it was a rapidly expanding cloud of red mist and superheated vapor. The lamppost it was holding clattered to the ground in the center of a newly formed, shallow crater, glowing cherry red. System announcement. Hostile brute eliminated. 500 survival points awarded. System announcement. 237 hostile walkers eliminated. 2,370 survival points awarded. System announcement. Mission. Rescue the Oak Haven PD complete. Bonus reward. +1 500 survival points. Total gained 4,370 points. A grin stretched across my face. Jackpot. That was more than enough for the next set of upgrades. The turret continued its work for another 30 seconds, methodically popping the heads of the remaining stunned walkers. Soon, the only sound was the wind, the distant hum of the Bulldog's engine, and the soft plink-plink-plink of spent shell casings being ejected onto the roof. The battle was over. What had been a days-long desperate siege for them had been a 2-minute push-button affair for me. This wasn't a fight. It was pest control. That was the ultimate slap in the face. Their training, their courage, their sacrifice, all of it rendered utterly meaningless in the face of overwhelming technological superiority. I drove the Bulldog right up to the shattered entrance of the station. The armored plating was splattered with gore, but inside I hadn't spilled a drop of my coffee. I hit a button and the reinforced passenger side door hissed open. Leaning back in my leather captain's chair, I called out, my voice normal now, no longer amplified. The area is secure. Welcome to the Ryder Corporation. Your probationary period is now over. Congratulations on your new employment. Mia Wallace was the first one to emerge, stumbling over the debris. Her rifle hung limply in her hands. Her face, which had been a mask of grim determination, was now just blank. She looked at the carnage, the headless bodies, the empty street, the smoldering crater where the brute used to be, and then she looked at me, sitting comfortably in my climate-controlled cabin. The young deputy followed, his eyes wide as dinner plates. What in God's name? He whispered, his voice cracking. God had nothing to do with it, I said flatly. That was engineering, and a healthy disregard for collateral damage. Get your people. You have 5 minutes to grab whatever personal effects and salvageable gear you want. We're leaving. Mia snapped out of her trance. The cop in her took over, even if the soldier was still reeling. There are civilians, 3 of them. A family hiding in the cells. Internal monologue. Oh, bonus prizes. Fantastic. Let's hope they have some useful skills and aren't just extra mouths to feed. Even better, I said, my tone unchanged. Load them up. Clock's ticking, Officer Wallace. Or should I say, Captain Wallace? You're the ranking officer of my new security detail, after all. The title seemed to both sting her pride and shock her back to reality. A promotion and a demotion, all in one sentence. She gave a curt, jerky nod and began barking orders, her voice rough but steady. Her team, my team, scrambled back inside, their movements clumsy with shock, but driven by a newfound, desperate purpose. While they worked, I accessed the system interface in my mind. System, show me available Fauday Riders Mart upgrades. A menu materialized in my vision. Upgrade options. 1. Defenses. Fortified walls LVL2 to LVL3. Reinforced concrete with steel plating. Cost 1,000 SP2. Defenses. Electric fence LVL1 to LVL2. High voltage grid. Cost 800 SP3. Facilities. Unlock rooftop to hydroponics farm LVL1. Cost 2,500 SP4. Facilities. Unlock basement to workshop LVL1. Cost 2,000 SP5. Weapons. Unlock small arms crafting bench. Cost 1,500 SP. Internal monologue. Food is the new gold. A self-sustaining, endlessly replenishing food source is paramount. Defense can wait a day. System. Purchase hydroponics farm LVL1. 2,500 survival points deducted. Remaining 1870 SP. Upgrade initiated. Hydroponics farm. 1 Latvian lats will be automatically constructed on the Riders Mart rooftop. Estimated time to completion 6 hours. Will be ready upon your return. Mia Lataura. Perfect. By the time we got back, we wouldn't just be a fortress. We'd be an oasis. The cops and their 3 civilians, a terrified-looking man, woman, and their teenage daughter, were herded into the Bulldog's spacious, surprisingly comfortable troop transport bay. Mia took the co-pilot seat next to me. She refused to look at me, staring straight ahead through the blood-smeared windshield. Where are we going? She finally asked, her voice low and tight. First, a personal errand. Then, home, I replied, pulling the massive truck into a smooth U-turn. My home? Your new barracks. Try to get some rest. You look like hell. She flinched, but didn't retort. What could she say? The man who just saved her life by casually deleting an army of the dead had just called her a new barracks. She was a professional warrior who'd just been made obsolete, a proud leader who had bartered her team's freedom for their lives. She had made a deal with the devil, and the devil drove an armored truck and drank coffee while committing acts of localized genocide. As we drove away from Oakhaven, I knew this event wasn't contained. The flash and sound from the thermobaric grenade would have been visible and audible for miles. People would talk. Whispers of a black truck, a steel monster that erased zombies, a voice from the heavens that dictated terms of life and death. The news was out. Thou Die Ridersmart was no longer a secret. And somewhere, in a heavily fortified compound on the other side of the city, I was sure some ex-colonel or wannabe warlord was looking at a map, marking the direction of the strange explosion, and wondering if they'd just found a new threat or a new, very shiny prize to be taken. Internal monologue. Let them come. The front door is always open for new customers, and new test subjects for Chloe's toys.